Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 122. It's the 26th of April. Dennis Kuratov and Kasper Rosalowski here with a fun show of Submission Radio. Some may even call it spicy, Kasper.
Yeah, I believe spicy is probably the perfect way to describe it. It is a spicy, sexy show, and we have some very fun guests coming on the program this week. Ryan Bader returns. Haven't spoken to him in a little bit, and breaking news, just the other day, he is officially in and part of Bellator 180. He'll be fighting Phil Davis for the Bellator light heavyweight title. I am excited, so we're going to be talking to him about that and a bunch of other things. Johny Hendricks returns to the program. It wasn't too long ago that he beat Hector Lombard in his middleweight debut, and before that he was talking about retirement, so now it seems like he's back on track. He's fighting Tim Bosch at UFC Fight Night 112. We want to talk to Johnny about a whole bunch of things, his new lifestyle, his new diet, things at middleweight, where he sees himself going in the division. Of course, GSP is now fighting at middleweight, so we got to ask that question. There's a lot to talk to Johnny about. Tommy Toehold, as has been customary on Submission Radio every once in a while, Tommy Toehold stops by, makes a spicy appearance, talks about fun things. I believe this week he's going to be talking about potential dream matchups, so that's going to be a lot of fun. Jorge Masvidal makes his first ever appearance on the program. I love having guests on for the first time. We've never spoken to Jorge, and he has a massive fight coming up at UFC 211 against Demian Maia that has some very serious title implications for the welterweight division. So Jorge Masvidal will be chatting to us. Another man that a lot of people may be surprised to hear about is Justin Flores, a phenomenal judoka, and he was Ronda Rousey's judo coach and grappling partner and training partner. He has known Ronda since, a very young age, and he can shed a lot of insight. So we're going to be talking to Justin. The order for the guests is going to be Ryan Bader, Justin Flores, Tommy Toehold with his appearance, Johny Hendricks, Jorge Masvidal, and then that's not it. We've got another guest as well, don't we, Dennis?
That's right, Cass. Elias Cepeda returning to the program, longtime friend of the show, doing great work with FloCombat, mixedmartialarts.com, and now going to be grappling this coming weekend at Fight to Win 33, which can be watched on Flow Grappling. Very excited to chat to him about his grappling competitions and also UFC Nashville. A lot of stuff to digest from there. Mike Perry, what's next for him? Iaquinta versus the UFC. What are our thoughts on that? Cris Cyborg versus the UFC. There's one to discuss. So I'm really excited to speak to Elias about all those things and get to the bottom of some of the stuff that people have been talking about this week in this crazy world of MMA, Cass. But you mentioned it. It's a sexy show. It's a spicy show. It's all those things and more. And we have our first guest on the line. Cass, I believe you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest was supposed to face King Mo at Bellator 180. However, due to an injury, Mo is out, and he will now face Phil Davis for the Bellator light heavyweight title. A friend of the program, one of Bellator's hottest new signings, Ryan Bader. Welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Good. What's going on, guys?
Oh, well, not as much as you. It's great to have you back on the program, but things are heating up in the world of Ryan Bader as we speak, and we're gonna get to that awesomeness that's going on in Ryan Bader's life in just a second. But before we jump to it, I've noticed, Ryan, you've been doing a little bit of shooting. I've been on your Instagram. There's some photos of you, and we instantly thought you'd be at the top of our list in case of a zombie apocalypse. Level with us.
There we go.
Is that why you were preparing?
Yeah.
Are you always staying ready for one?
Yeah, you never know, right? And then, so we got to go down in Texas and train with some bad dudes down there, and spent about a good 2 days, 2.5 days there, just training on pistols and the AR platforms, all that kind of stuff, shooting at a helicopter. So it was pretty badass. So we had fun. I've always kind of been into that, and I have a lot of friends in the military and some on the SEAL teams and stuff like that. So it was definitely cool to dive even deeper into it and learn some new skills, and we're just having fun with it.
Wow, I think shooting out of a helicopter is like my life's dream. Once that's done, I don't need to do anything else in my life. How good of a shooter are you, though, Ryan? And are you just a gunman, or do you have some sneaky knife skills as well that we're not aware of?
I always have a knife on me, but I don't think I have much knife skills per se, other than what I've learned in the movies, which is pretty badass. But other than that, Not really.
I could just imagine something happening and Ryan pulling out his trusty pocket knife and saving someone's life by cutting out their appendix or something like that. Their appendix is about to burst. Ryan, jump out with your trusty pocket knife. Have you had those kinds of moments? Have you been saving people with your pocket knife?
It was kind of funny, not with my pocket knife, but we so I have a camera kind of looking out at our house, like in the front drive area, and we've been having this coyote come in. And eats like my dog's dog food and hangs out and stuff. And so I go out there at 3 a.m. one time, like, cause it texts my phone when there's like movement at certain times. So get a text and I look and there's this damn coyote out front. And so I go out there, I'm just in my underwear and I just start yelling at it, like seeing if it would, just leave, whatever. And it starts like walking towards me. So I'm like, this fucking guy, all right. And so I look down, and all there is a tricycle, my kid's tricycle. So I picked that up, and I just run out. I was like, and took off quick. And so, it was whatever, 3 a.m. I walked back into the room, and my wife was dying laughing. She was watching on her phone on my camera the whole time. And then she posted it on Instagram for all to see. And she's like, yeah, my husband has an arsenal of weapons, but he chooses a kid's tricycle to go after this coyote.
I love it. It's like the coyote wasn't scared of you, but once the tricycle came into play, the coyote was like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with this.
He took off. I think I gave it that growl. I tried to punk him out, and he was like, no, what's going on? And I was like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, we and the thing is, we know your daughter's sort of young, but all this, the guns, the knives, the tricycles, is this just like a sneaky way of being the scariest father-in-law possible? Because we're picturing that scene from Bad Boys 2 where the kid young Reggie comes to take Martin Lawrence's daughter out, and the intimidation ensues. Is this your master plan?
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, she has an older brother and a younger brother that's close in age too, and the younger one that's 2 years old is a beast right now. So. Between me and the two boys there, she's going to have some trouble for sure.
I could just see her prom date rocking up and you're running out in with a tricycle. It worked for the coyote, it worked for the prom date. I mean,
done this before.
You have to give us some tips when we have the children one day. But let's talk about the master beta tip videos. I mean, these things are awesome. We noticed them recently. They've been a big hit online. A lot of people sort of seeing Ryan Bader's comedic side. Talk to us. How long have you been planning these, and what's the favorite been thus far?
We really haven't been planning them much. One day we're like, hey, let's do some tips, and everybody loves a little masturbator name, so I use that. And we have a videographer we use with another company. So just kind of got a few things that people want to see, like the Seagate defense and all that. And the one we kind of did on blurred it out. I actually had underwear on, but it turned out funny. We had fun with them and tried to do actual real techniques.
Yeah, for those who didn't see, you mentioned that single leg takedown defense. Well, you look like you were naked, and we don't know whether you were wearing underwear or not, but there was a lot of blurring, and obviously your training partner shot in with his face in the danger zone. Has your partner recovered?
Oh yeah, that was a real deal. That's how you defend that. But no, I did have underwear under that, and it was just for great comedy. So it was fun though. They're legit techniques.
Well, I mean, it seems like now that you're out of the UFC, you're kind of feeling a little bit more free to express yourself and show people a new side of you. Is that kind of how you're feeling now? It's a new Ryan Bader, and sort of the world's the limit.
Yeah, everything from we can have sponsors back and all that, and it just kind of, it wasn't like I could not do these things. Just kind of like, all right, who cares now? It's just gonna be me and do whatever. I'm gonna say whatever. Felt like I was taking off the leash a little bit for sure.
Mm. And how does it feel to be out of the UFC officially? Because last time we spoke, it was pretty much a done deal. It took a little bit longer than expected, but now that it's official, you're looking, you're no longer a UFC fighter, something that hasn't happened in almost 10 years. Is that a weird feeling?
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, it's refreshing, and I'm, it's kind of a setback, not a setback, but the word I'm looking for? It's just like I said, it's refreshing, and I'm more motivated now, and it's just something new, and so for me is people are asking like, oh, you're leaving the UFC and whatnot. Look what's happening. I get to have my sponsors back. I'm fighting for a title. Not only that, but right when I signed with Bellator, they come out that they're doing a huge show in Madison Square Garden in New York. So it just kind of reassured everything that I was doing. I was on the right path, and it felt rejuvenated, basically. That's the word I was looking for, and so I'm excited. I'm motivated. I get the opportunity to finally fight for a title. I've never had that in my MMA career. I've won everything in wrestling and whatnot, but then I never had the chance to fight for a belt in any organization because I never was in one besides the UFC. I never fought twice in, a earlier promotion. So, here's my chance, here's my opportunity, and that's all I really wanted.
I mean, we discussed it the other episode, but we don't really think we've seen the UFC light heavyweight division in the state that it's in ever before. Not only did they lose you, but now Anthony Johnson has seemingly retired, throwing the whole division into a tailspin. What did you think when you saw him retiring? Were you surprised as everybody else was in the MMA world?
Yeah, I kind of heard rumblings, like, no pun intended there, but that he was going to retire. I just heard it from other people, so I wasn't too surprised when he was actually retiring. I heard he had a job with the Rams or something like that. So it is what it is. It's more power to him. He was dominated a lot of guys. He lost in a title fight, but I feel that his mind really wasn't in that one. If you're already thinking about retiring, going into a fight, you're kind of done, regardless. So. It's more people should do that. More people should say, hey, this is my time. I'm going to get out before it's too late, before I get knocked out 10 times in my career and whatnot. So, I think he had a lot of potential and a lot of, great fights left in him, but more power to him for him to say, hey, I'm done.
Yeah, and in a funny turn of events, are you kind of happy that Rumble didn't retire while you were still hashing out your deal between the UFC and Bellator? Because our guess would be that whatever deal you originally wanted from the UFC, they'd basically have no choice but to match it to keep you in their division, and you wouldn't really be in this position where, you are fighting Phil Davis for a world title on a massive show.
No, exactly. And I have a great contract with Bellator and everything, so it was something I could not pass up, and I didn't think the UFC was going to match that, so I kind of feel like it's a one-of-a-kind deal with them and in MMA in general. So I feel like we have one of the better deals outside of being a UFC champion and getting pay-per-view points and being able to pull numbers, I feel like I have one of the better deals in all of mixed martial arts. So I'm super, excited and positioned on that, and I'm looking forward to it.
So, sorry, just to cut in there really quick. So, does that mean that you will get pay-per-view points in the future? When you are on Bellator pay-per-views, you will get pay-per-view points. And I'm just curious, do you need to be headlining it, or is just your presence enough for you to get pay-per-view points these days?
No, we never negotiated pay-per-view points because we never thought they were gonna do a pay-per-view. Okay. And so we do have some TV stuff like that. That's why Phil Davis and I. We're headlining the Bellator 180, which is on Spike, So I feel that's better for me and better for us. We're going to get more views. Who knows how many pay-per-view buys they're going to do on that on the first one. It's a great card, but who knows? So I'd rather be on the Spike portion. So what I mean by that I just feel like out of all the different MMA contracts, I have the better one outside of a UFC champion that has pay-per-view points.
Let's talk about this opponent switch. I mean, usually an injured opponent sucks, but to us, this kind of seems like the best case scenario here. What was your reaction when you found out King Mo was out and he'd be fighting Phil Davis for the title? Set the scene for us. Where were you? What went through your mind? Who gave you the phone call?
Yeah, I was just at at the house on Sunday. My manager called and said, hey, King Mo's out. I was like, oh, man, I just had all my friends and family get tickets out to New York, and they're super expensive. Flying across the country, all that kind of stuff. And then he's like, well, but we have Phil Davis. And I was like, awesome. I was like, but when? I figuring they're not going to do it on the New York card because they already have 2 title fights. And he said, no, same deal. New York, same Madison Square Garden, main eventing on, Spike. So he's kind of the best of everything. It all kind of worked out. We had the option to wait for Phil Davis later on, potentially in November. I wanted to be on the New York card, so I said, "Hey, I'll take a fight. Let's do whoever." And then they kind of came in and said, if King Mo looks good, we'll do King Mo and you in Madison Square Garden, because I wanted to fight regardless on that card. And then, hey, it worked out. So I'm super excited, and I've been training hard throughout this whole process, but ramping it up this week and until fight time. And so, all I wanted was an opportunity, in the UFC or whatnot. And there's times when I think I should have had an opportunity to fight for the title. So now I have one, and it's just time to get to work and just go out there and win a belt.
And it's kind of amazing that, you were in the UFC for so many years, and, you've spoken about how maybe a little bit underappreciated, you didn't get that opportunity, and here you are in Bellator, you get in that opportunity in your first ever fight there. It's kind of crazy. But also, in a lot of ways, it seemed like, this was the fight to book from the very beginning. You and Phil Davis, you were coming into the company with a win over Phil. Were you surprised Bellator even wanted to do the King Mo fight in the first place?
I think they wanted to do that fight right away. It's just other factors. I don't think they wanted to have that many title fights on, in one card. That's 3 5-round fights on that card, and different other factors. And so that's why I had that option, but we wanted to fight. We didn't want to wait. That would have been a year if I waited till November. And so it all worked out in the end. We got offered, Phil, and I think Phil wanted to fight on that New York card also. So in the end, it all worked out. But I think we were Bellator and and I and my team were on the same page as far as getting Phil first fight. That was his last loss. Coming in, 2 top 5 guys in the world. So, but it all worked out in the end.
Let's talk about this matchup there, this rematch. I mean, you mentioned previously you have fought Phil Davis. When you look at the Phil Davis that you beat back in the UFC and the Phil Davis here in Bellator today, that's the light heavyweight champion, do you see much of a difference?
No, not really. It's the same guy. Everybody with experience gets better. I think it's just being in there. But he uses kicks well. I don't think he likes to get hit very much. That's why he keeps that distance. He keeps that awkward motion. He's obviously has a great ground game, good wrestling. I've felt that before already, and I've been in there with him, so that's a plus too. I've only had one other rematch in my life, and it was my last fight with Nogueira. So I look forward to it. I know what he's bringing. He kind of knows what I'm bringing, but the thing is, I've gotten a lot better since our first fight. So that's where I feel it's going to be the difference. I feel like I've grown more than he has.
Well, yeah, you mentioned just now the improvements on your end. He was on the MMA Hour just the other day, and he said that he believed that King Mo was a bad stylistic matchup for you, and that he's glad that fight fell out because he wants to be the first one to give you a loss before King Mo does. What do you think of that, and do you feel like he's underestimating you in this one?
Yeah, I do. I feel like I'm a different fighter than when we first fight. So I think he's going to be surprised. If he was surprised the first time, he's going to be more surprised this time. I'm more well-rounded than I was. My striking's better. Everything's better. My mentality's better. And so we're ready. I'm motivated. He won that title and he has it. I haven't won a title. I want to go in there and take that away from him and have it for my own. So I'm super motivated, and I think it's going to be a different fight. I'm looking to go in there. I'm looking to finish this fight and make a statement for sure.
Yeah, I mean, on that, like you mentioned, the first fight went the distance. Some people sort of disagreed with the decision. You want to make a statement in this fight, but in your mind, is there a particular way that you see it going? Does it finish early? Is it something that goes for a few rounds? How do you sort of see it going in your mind?
I can't really, I don't really know. It's one of those things I'm prepared to go 5 rounds hard, but if it doesn't, great. Go in there and I can finish the fight. That's what I want to do. But I'm always prepared to go in there and grind it out. That being said, last couple of fights, I've finished the fights and knocked out in Latifi and then, finished Big Nog on the ground. And I would love to go in there and make it a 3 in a row with a championship fight.
Obviously, you've got this big fight ahead of you, but on that card, the Bellator NYC one, which will work out well because it'll be after your fight finishes. You've got all these big names who are, in or near your weight class, like Chael Sonnen, like Wanderlei Silva, like Fedor Emelianenko, Matt Mitrione. Do you think after your fight you might sort of take the time and watch those fights? You'll be in a position to enjoy them and maybe think about sort of planning your next move and sort of, maybe even calling out one of those guys?
Yeah, it's going to be a cool position because we're going to be fighting early in the card, on the spike portion. So I love doing that. I'll be fighting before midnight over there. Those guys will be fighting at 2 a.m. So I'm used to fighting late like that. I fought Phil when it was 3 a.m. And, it's just one of those things where you got to do what you got to do. But I get to go in there, win a title, sit down with my belt, and watch these guys, watch the pay-per-view portion. I don't know if those guys are going to be in time contention, but, it'd be good to sit there and watch the guys in my weight class duke it out, especially some legends like Fedor and all that. I'm looking forward to that. Sitting there with the belt and the beer, having a good time.
Do you think maybe you'll sit cage side, and maybe that way you can sit there, you can hold the belt, and while people are watching the fights, there'll be a little bit extra attention on Ryan Bader. If you were to sort of want to call anyone out, you can jump in the cage right afterwards.
Yeah, you never know. I'm looking forward to it though, having that belt sitting there, and I got to go to a Bellator event, my first one. And, a couple of weeks ago, and it was a great experience, and I was treated really, really well, and it was just a huge experience. And so I'm looking forward to getting in there, getting my feet wet, fighting. Not only that, I'm fighting for the title first, so glad it happened. And, not only that, I get to bring my sponsors in the cage and all that kind of good stuff. So just in a good spot right now, and I'm like I said, I'm rejuvenated and motivated. It's something new. And I finally get an opportunity.
And just quickly on that, if you were to, this is sort of just having a bit of fun here, but if you had to sort of choose to and you were the champion, you had to choose to fight a person next from the Fedor Mitrione matchup or the Sun and Vanderlei matchup, who would you choose? I mean, who sort of seems like the funner, more exciting matchup for yourself? Possibly, I suppose, fighting Fedor or the winner of Sun and Vanderlei?
Is Tito Ortiz still retired?
Yeah, only until he's unretired, right?
Yeah, I would love to get obviously I lost a fight and upset the Tito back in the day in, 2011 or whatnot. So I'd love to get that fight back. That's one I'd always want to get back. But, for me, it's a Fedor fight would be awesome. It was one of those things where it's a lot of respect. I've got to fight some legends in the sport, and he's one of those guys I've always was a huge fan of. And I've got to fight guys like Rampage, all those studs and guys I've watched growing up, and so definitely Fedor's one of those fights that I definitely would love to have, even if it wasn't for a title, and if it was just one of those fun, catch weight, heavyweight fights. Probably definitely him.
Wow, exciting times. Guys, make sure to follow Ryan Bader on Twitter and Instagram. A lot more Coyote videos, I'm sure, to come at Ryan Bader and see him fight.
Yeah, that one's on my wife. It's Daisy Bader. She's private, but if she lets you in, you might be able to check it out.
Well, if you want to swing that by Submission Radio, I mean, we're happy to put that video out there, and the whole world can see that. But in the meantime, see Ryan Bader fight for the Bellator light heavyweight title against Phil Davis, June 24th, 2017, live and free on Spike TV. They're obviously main eventing the Spike TV card, and it's obviously in Madison Square Garden, which makes it extra special. A career's worth of work, and you'll be realizing that on that day. So, Ryan, as always, thank you so much for chatting with us. We always appreciate it.
It's been fun, guys. Thanks as always.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a judo superstar who's been a world team member, trained with some of the best grapplers in the world, competed in over 30 countries, and was an alternate in the 2004 Olympics in judo. He's trained and worked with some of the biggest names in MMA, including Ronda Rousey, and when he's not in the gym, he runs his own multimedia design company. It is a pleasure to welcome Justin Flores to Submission Radio. Justin, welcome to the program. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're very happy to finally have you on the show. And we're very lucky to have some time with you because your son Adam was recently born, and I believe you've been busier than ever. Give us the lowdown. How many hours a night are you sleeping, and what's the first few months been like?
Oh, man, it's surreal, dude. Like, I get in between 4 to 6 hours a night of sleep. And
wow.
So everything's a little foggy and hazy. Every shirt I have has spit up on it. It's great. I mean, I don't think any of it is a negative. It's just I definitely have to push a little harder every day and ask a little more of myself. And my wife is like bearing most of the weight. She's the one who's right now playing with him and keeping him in good company while we do this. So I have a lot to be appreciative over.
Ah, yeah. Respect to you. We could never function on that little sleep. So massive respect to you, Justin. And of course, your judo career is legendary. Just wondering, have you gotten him his first gi yet? We imagine he's already probably begun throwing people around in class.
Oh, man, he's been on the mat plenty over at Studio 540, but no gi yet. I don't know if they make him that size, but sure we could have something custom made up. I actually do a bunch of work for geek manufacturer Mizuno and Fuji, and maybe that might be the next order of business, getting him a little kitty gi.
Oh, wow. Can you imagine that? That would be amazing. And I mean, Fuji, a well-known brand around here. I think they would make a lot of money with baby geese. You know, on a cold day, they can use them to stay warm while at the same time throwing evil bullies in the kindergarten playground. So I think there's a lot of marketing potential there, Justin.
Yeah, you may be onto something. It's kind of gimmicky. I like it though. I mean, obviously they're not going to be doing any real grappling, but it's definitely something that could be looked into there.
Yeah, don't forget, percentage 80% goes to me. Don't steal my ideas, Justin. This isn't how it works.
The idea was born now. Everyone heard it, so yeah, I think it's something.
I'm getting my lawyers to trademark it as we speak. But look, you were very well known in the judo community. Like Casper mentioned, you know, you've had a legendary career and you've had so many achievements and accomplishments. But for MMA fans that are right now listening and don't really know your history, talk to us about some of your favorite judo achievements. What sort of stands out in your career?
Sure. So, well, let me just give you a little context as well as my judo career. I also started wrestling in high school, and my brother, at the same time as me going into high school, was one weight class above me on the international judo roster for the Olympics. And he was a good wrestler, but not a great wrestler. And I kind of started wrestling to a higher level. And while he became the number one player in the U.S., I excelled in wrestling. So I actually took a wrestling scholarship after high school, and I was the number one ranked high school wrestler in the country coming out of high school in my weight class. So I received the full ride scholarship to the University of Nebraska, which is a Big Ten powerhouse wrestling university. So I have a little bit of background in that for which is really applicable to MMA. You know, judo is as well, obviously, but wrestling just has a whole nother dimension as far as like positions with no gi and understanding, you know, control of another human being without having to have any friction with no gi. So I have that, and I use that a little bit more as far as like when I'm coaching top athletes in MMA to kind of develop those skills, because I feel like some of that is a little bit more fundamental. And judo is much more finesse and a beautiful art form. And it's only like when I'm finishing off an athlete or building those very detailed skills that will delve into some of the concepts that judo has compared to wrestling, because wrestling is a little bit more general and you can learn quicker, like a shot and a sprawl and underhook and an overhook, rather than some of those nuances that judo has and embodies. So my background in wrestling is pretty vast. And then after college, my college wrestling was finished, I went back into judo, and I was able to win the U.S. Nationals 5 times and was on 3 world teams and finished 9th at the 2007 World Championships. Was a Pan Am Championships medalist, and I had many World Cup top finishes around the world. So I had a pretty vast and comprehensive career in judo. And only after, more recently, while I was training with Rhonda and I relocated from the East Coast back to the West Coast, I started to train jiu-jitsu, and I started teaching judo at Studio 540, which is a pretty prominent jiu-jitsu academy globally and really well known for having some of the top players that train and do seminars at Studio 540. And I started teaching there, and I started taking classes under Fabio Santos. And he's like a really high regarded, well-known professor in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he actually was cornering Royce Gracie at UFC 1. and this guy's a legend. So I started training under him, and within 5 classes, I had earned my purple belt, and within 8 or 9 classes under him, he gave me my brown belt. And then it's been a while just now because, the kid and just traveling with USA Judo and coaching Rhonda before her last fight. So I haven't been able to go too much to his classes, but I still do train at Studio 540 under other teachers because he stopped teaching there. So he's back down a little more south, a little bit out of my range. So it's about 45 minutes of a drive, which right now is just a little too far, but I look forward to going back there and trying to earn my black belts under him. So that's kind of a little bit about me in a short, concise way.
Mm-hmm. Just to be clear, you mentioned you went to purple belt and then you went to brown belt in a very small amount of classes. What was the time period from white to brown? How long did it take?
I think it was like 5 months, 4.5, 5 months.
Jeez.
Wow.
Is that a world record? Has anybody ever gone that quickly? That must be some kind of record.
No, I wasn't looking to break records or anything. It was just in judo, there's arm bars, there's chokes, there's pin, there's like guard passes. It's all the same skills, but the rules are just slanted just a little bit different. And in jiu-jitsu, you have a little bit more time as far as like what you could use on the ground. In judo, it's a little bit more rushed, as you might know. So, and a lot of wrestling that I use, was ground skills as well. So I have like 25 years on the mat, and I think jiu-jitsu just helped me kind of think about my ground game a little bit more different, how to kind of function a little better off my back, how to incorporate leg locks and leg lock defense, which that's a skill that I never delved into in all my years of judo and wrestling. So some of those kind of scrambling positions aren't as safe in jiu-jitsu as whereas in judo and wrestling, you're okay and you're safe. So I still have a lot to learn, and I have a lot of fun not being a coach or teaching when I do jiu-jitsu. So that's like my escape of sorts, which I really do enjoy.
Yeah, that is amazing how quickly you ascended through the ranks. I mean, yeah, geez. And when you factor everything else you have in your grappling arsenal, it's amazing. Now, you mentioned obviously some of your theories on how you train fighters, but what people may not realize, you've worked with lots of different MMA fighters. I mean, just going through your Instagram, it's a who's who of MMA stars, from BJ Penn, Jessica Penne, you mentioned Ronda Rousey. When and how did you first start working with athletes from the sport? What sort of drove you to there? And did you ever consider jumping over from judo and, of course, wrestling and jiu-jitsu to maybe MMA yourself?
Yeah, so back in like the real early days of MMA, and I was really good friends with Caro Parisian down here in Southern California, where he kind of took the reins as far as judoka jumping into MMA in the early 2000s. And my brother and myself used to compete with him and Manny Gamburian every weekend. We were good friends, and we'd compete against each other. We would train together. And I remember a turning point in the early 2000s where he started going down to Mexico and fighting in what he would call no holds barred. And he would kind of try and convince me and my brother to like, hey, there's this opening, this possible way to make money and to kind of do something a little different than judo, and you could use your skills, and it might be something, we could all be successful in. And me and my brother were pretty true to just the art of judo and the Olympics and trying to accomplish those goals. Whereas he went another route and became superstar in those early days of the UFC, fought for the belts, or you're supposed to fight for the belt against GSP, but he tore his hamstring, which inevitably became kind of his downfall. But yeah, I did ponder it for a while there. But only then in those early days. Later, I have some really bad knee injuries. I've had over a dozen knee surgeries, and my neck is not so good. So I think after I finished competing in 2008, I was very content on being able to just sit back and kind of finish college and do those things that I neglected because I was on the road most of the time and competing globally. And I wasn't able to really kind of do those normal day-to-day things I had to kind of leave behind. So starting a new career in MMA just wasn't on the plate at that time. So, but I really do enjoy working with these athletes and being able to dispense information that they might not know and to try and help them, guide them in their careers.
And I mean, let's talk about that, because there's been a lot of negativity towards where judo fits in the sort of general skill set of an MMA fighter. There's some like Chael Sonnen, who was actually on this program himself and sort of basically said that judo has no real use in the sport. And then there's others who train it regularly. So sort of as a coach and a successful judo competitor and a person that's worked with these MMA fighters, successful MMA fighters, where do you sit on that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like Chael Sonnen, I mean, he was a great fighter, but he's kind of a clown in my opinion, as far as like him never really competing in judo and he should respect it from what I think as being an Olympic sport. It's produced, you know, Akiyama, Daniel Kelly, Ronda Rousey, Carl Parisian, Rick Hahn, just to name a few. So, I mean, obviously it speaks for itself. Like the results in being able to use your hips, armbar submissions, chokes, just balance against wrestlers. I think those skills are almost second to none as far as grappling and posture. Compared to wrestling, you kind of learn how to be a little more heavy-footed and sprawl-oriented rather than using your hips to defend shots. So I think just your overall posture as a wrestler kind of leaves you susceptible to a good striking, because you're flat-footed and you're crunched over. That's just a natural kind of stance that you're going to take. Whereas in judo, you're light on your feet. You learn to circle a little bit more, find angles. You're upright in your posture. Grip fighting is done from an upright, just like quick hands, just like striking. So you can almost relate those skills into MMA quicker. So I do find it very important that you do need to learn how to sprawl. You do need to learn how to shoot a shot, one shot. It doesn't have to be a variety of shots, just one good shot to keep your opponent guessing. But yeah, I mean, I respect Chael Sonnen. Maybe a clown is too far, because, you know, I love judo and I'm going to defend it to the death, even if I'm wrong sometimes. But yeah, I think judo has a really big place in MMA. And I mean, if we're going to go all the way historically speaking, I think judo as being like the grandfather of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is obviously relevant in MMA. So I think just taking that into account, like historically, I think judo has just as good of a place or more than any martial art. Mm-hmm. So that's my perspective, at least. I mean, I'm sure you could get a bunch of jiu-jitsu guys to kind of dispute my claims of it kind of judo coming from jiu-jitsu, but I mean, if you do your history, your research, you'll find that I might be right. So
yeah, I think you make a lot of valid points. We're certainly not going to sit here and argue with you on that one. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, though, obviously in MMA, there are no gis. And, you know, from a coach's perspective like yourself, you know, if someone wants to train judo purely for MMA, do they focus on no-gi classes, or are gi classes sort of vital to still sharpen those skills?
So I would train with Rhonda and Jessica and a few others in the gi once in a while, just to kind of be able to accentuate a few points like kazushi, which is balance breaking, and those kind of skills that are a little bit more difficult to learn with no gi. But if you grasp those concepts in a gi, you could transfer them over to no gi a little bit easier than just starting from scratch with the sweaty human and not kind of being able to understand those off balance points. So the gi is very important in judo, jiu-jitsu, just to be able to find angles and find where you're off balancing your opponent. But I think it's the best way to train is no gi for MMA. That's just like the way I would train any athlete. But I would change positions from like a collar grip or a high grip to a whizzer or an overhook, and use some of those same techniques and incorporate them as defenses rather than offenses when your opponent's driving into you. Because it's a lot more difficult to pull an opponent off balance when they're not wearing a gi. But if they're driving into you or shooting in a leg shot, you could use that as a counter. So those are where I kind of use judo's skills into the MMA athletes I coach.
And I mean, you just mentioned one of your most notable MMA ninjas, of course, Ronda Rousey. We know both of you have had a very long relationship. How did you two first meet?
So, my father is actually Ronda's godfather. So I've known Ronda since she was basically in diapers, and me and my brother were national level judo players when we were teenagers, and Ronda and her mother moved back from the Dakotas back to Los Angeles in the late 90s, and from then on she was kind of a mainstay on our couch for long weeks and weekends, a few times a month, to train at our judo club in Southern California, where my dad would run class, and me and my brother and about a dozen other high-level judo players would kind of beat up on her and kind of help groom her to who she became. So, she was always around and always training as hard as you could imagine. And she was the one who was never giving up. Her hair would be everywhere. Nose would be bleeding. She'd be crying. Her shirt was halfway off. Her gi was all frazzled, and she would still be coming after you. She had no quit in her. And I always knew that she was going to be the one to possibly be the first U.S. player to win the Olympics in judo, just by her grit and her will and just her never give up attitude.
I mean, it sounds like Dennis and I when we used to do judo, minus the grit and the mental attitude. It's a pretty impressive relationship with you. Obviously, still coaching her now. Well, what do you think makes you guys such a good team? I mean, obviously, you mentioned sort of on her end the grit and the tenacity, but as far as your working relationship and working together, what is it that made you guys click so well?
There's a lot there. I think I am a little bit more, since I finished competing, because I used to be a lot more like her. I was very like intense, and I wasn't as even keeled. And then, I got some perspective, and I was able to kind of like get some balance in my life and get married and create something off the mat for myself, which helped me become a way better coach, because I could kind of take a step back from those heated moments and be able to help athletes for what's best for them, not what's best for me. I don't need to get the best out of training for me. So I was able to take the ego out of it. And when 2013, I moved back to California from the East Coast, and she gave me a call, and she's like, "Justin, let's start training again. And can you help coach me?" She, at the time, was training with Martin Barbarian, who's a world-class wrestler, and she didn't really have anyone to help her with her judo or to highlight that area of her grappling, which is her base. So it was before the Sarah McMahon fight. I started working with her again, and it was a really good fit. I mean, just not only just drills and skills, but being able to go 5-minute goes hard with her and to give her what she needs in a way that's not going to injure her, because that's really important. Because she had people coming out of the woodwork trying to just challenge her and finding where she's training and to try and just beat her because she has a big name. And that's not the smartest move. So I was able to kind of provide a safety net and hard training simultaneously and give her those hard pushes that she needed without ever really risking her of injuring herself, which is the most important thing, as we all know, for MMA fighters going into hard camps and trying to function by fight time, sometimes impossible because they've so broken down from beating themselves up. So I kind of was able to provide that for her, I would say, was most important.
And I mean, speaking of the whole overall team, I mean, it's no secret that Ronda's head coach, Edmund, had a bit of a roller coaster ride when it comes to sort of public perception in the MMA community. At the beginning, he was highly touted, and now many feel like Ronda is better off training with other striking coaches. And you'd know Edmund quite well. So where do you sit on his influence on Ronda and her evolution as a fighter?
Well, I mean, MMA is primarily, I would have to say, these days is my perspective, has become more of a striking art. Like it's mixed martial arts, but I think the strikers are kind of have closed that gap from the early days where you have your Royce Gracies and your big high level grapplers that have evolved to being the best. And now I think some of these strikers have been able to kind of take over a little bit more from what I see, just from what I gauged. And I think her falling in love with striking and boxing and footwork and timing and try and become the best striker she could be. She entrenched herself fully, and she is really competitive. So she, would drill nonstop and try and do what she could do to become, the best striker she could be. And I mean, I kind of understand Edmund's role in how he tried to provide that for her. And my job was to kind of provide that balance, to say, hey, okay, we're doing great here with the striking, but let's get back to what kind of got her here. And sometimes it would be tough to balance that, because I'm down here in San Diego, she's training in LA, so it'd be tough to be able to go up there every day and make sure she was getting that in. So I'd have to kind of, trust Edmund to make sure that those things were happening while I wasn't there as well with Martin. And from what I know, like everything I know is her and Martin would train on those off days. So she was still being able to get a lot of the grappling that she needed. It was just what she chose to do on fight night. And those are, as we all saw, it didn't work out so well. I'm not blaming anyone here. It's just the way the fight game is, So she had a lot of great wins and a few bad ones there. So it's just a hard thing to see to someone you really love and you've known your whole life for it to end like that. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to elaborate past to a certain point just because, I respect all the people involved and I don't want to do anyone any harm,
Yeah, and that's fair enough. There's a lot to unpack with what you just said there, Justin. But I'm just curious, do you think it's likely that we'll see her train with a new head coach or striking coach? Because I think the general perception is that Ronda would never leave Edmund, despite what a lot of people and critics think would, maybe would be good. Not necessarily even to say that Edmund isn't good, but I think a lot of people just believe in cross-training and going to other different camps and gaining new perspectives. Do you think it's likely that we would ever see her sort of, getting her feet wet anywhere else?
I'm not sure. I still do talk to Ronda fairly often. She's really busy, but we don't really discuss anything that has to do with MMA or the fight game in general these days. So I know she's taking a step back from all of that. So, I mean, I really don't know. I have no place to speak on what she's going to do because I haven't really discussed that with her. I just am, a good friend to her, and I just hope the best for her. And, I mean, just personally speaking, in judo and wrestling and all the sports that I've competed in, I was kind of like I would travel a lot and go to different camps and train with the best and train under the best and kind of become kind of like a well-rounded that way rather than I'm at this one place forever. And it just helps you kind of be able to fill in gaps if there are any, because you get fresh eyes, fresh training partners. So from my perspective, I always think it's good to be able to do that, to move around and to have other people take looks and to train with different people as long as it's safe and they're highly regarded. So as a coach, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying from my perspective. So I couldn't speak anyway on what she's going to choose to do. So, I just don't know.
Justin, I think a common misconception with Ronda Rousey, and I mean, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this as someone that's worked with her on her grappling, is the fact that she focused a lot on the judo, but we never really saw her pursue wrestling techniques such as a single leg, double legs in her fight. And a lot of people felt like if she mixed up her takedowns and not just used the judo, but those other techniques, she would have had quite a bit of success. Now, obviously, you're a man who's well-versed in almost every type of grappling. Was that something you two worked on? Was there a reason why we never saw her sort of attempt those? Sort of talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's something that a lot of people don't really quite understand, and it's just a fascinating perspective.
Yeah, no, that it is. And I think she had a few limitations physically to be able to do any kind of real penetration shot, to like be able to do a high level drop step or to be able to cover a lot of distance based on her knees. So being able to do like any kind of drop step that's explosive and can cover a lot of ground, you need decent knees. Unless you have really high level skills and you can adapt it for MMA in your own way. But she didn't have that basis for a good leg shot. So I don't think it was too late in the game, but I do think it would have been something that would have had to have been a tremendous amount of focus. And her knee just isn't great. She has the knee of a 60-year-old. So, it's difficult to say. So I don't know whether or not, I feel the burden of that, and we should have done that more. But I do know her defending leg shots and being able to use that to capitalize using judo is second to none. So that was more or less where the wrestling would play in that we worked. So I think that she has a decent snatch single, which is something that you're already tied up and you could go down and use like an ankle pick or grab like a knee tap. But I don't think that something from far away being able to penetrate is something that was really in her wheelhouse. So, yeah, I mean, if that makes any sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm actually glad you said that because it's something that we've always wondered, and I think a lot of people as well. So it's glad that you sort of answered that. Let's move on to UFC 207. And by the way, Justin, we appreciate the time you're giving us. We'll let you go in a moment. UFC 207, obviously a difficult time for the Rousey team. We know you worked with her leading into that fight with Amanda. From everything that went on in preparations, how did you think that fight would go, as you sort of got her ready?
Oh, man. So that question I can't really get too deep into for reasons. Like, I signed an NDA as far as, like, being able to speak on the specifics there.
Sure.
But generally speaking, overall, I'm always confident whenever Ronda's out there. I've seen her compete thousands of times. And, I mean, it was just hard to see and a hard pill to swallow for her, much more than me. Obviously, I'm just an onlooker there who loves her and wants her to do her best. So it was difficult to see, and my heart was broken. That's for sure. I know the work we put in was high level, and I did everything in my power to help her. And I do think that it was helpful. It just the chips fell and it just didn't work out.
I mean, the loss to Holly Holm was a very tough one on Ronda physically and mentally. Do you think that she ever sort of truly recovered from what happened here in Melbourne? Because a lot of people felt like when they saw her in UFC 207, and again, we don't know how much you can say about this, but a lot of rumors and a lot of people felt like she almost looked like she didn't really want to be back in that octagon, or she wasn't quite ready mentally to be back in that octagon. How much physically and mentally did that loss impact her, and was she recovered, do you think, from that when she stepped into the octagon at UFC 207?
I mean, she did take that loss a lot worse, I think, if I had to, like, the first loss, the one to Holly, a lot worse. So, I mean, I don't know if that speaks if that says anything, but, I mean, she man, she was as ready as you can be. Her weight was great. Physically, everything was organized in a way where she was tip-top for this Amanda Nunes fight. So, like, she was able to kind of take that loss and recover, and she had all of her physical ailments that happened from that fight recovered and healthy. So, I mean, she was ready. I mean, it's just maybe it's something mentally there that just didn't add up on fight night, but I was still supremely confident, and as I still would be forever. And if she decided to come back and fight again, I would be confident in her being able to win fights and to accomplish whatever goals she had, just because I know her down to a core and the competitive spirit she has. So, I mean, I just can't answer the fact whether or not one had to do with the other. But, I mean, from an outside perspective, maybe. From an inside perspective, I'm with her a lot, and I see her training, and she feels strong in training, and she was much more open-minded to different training tactics after that Holly Holm fight. So, I mean, to me, she became a little bit more well-rounded. I don't know, on fight night, just things kind of unraveled, but I don't know.
Just really quickly, Justin, you mentioned she's still training. How often would you say she's still training these days?
Oh, I mean, just from the little I've seen, she went out to Vegas and trained with Ricky Lundell a little bit because Travis was getting ready for his fight. So, I mean, not that I know of. I mean, maybe she's in the gym here and there, but I think she's primarily just kind of doing her television show series and kind of laying low for the time being. So, yeah, she's not really hitting it hard from what I know.
Justin, we appreciate the time. We'll wrap it up in just a second. I mean, the big question here in everybody's mind is, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think she'll ever fight again in the UFC? Do you think she'll ever return to fight again?
Oh, man, there's a lot of layers to that.
Sure.
Personally, from what I mean, I would support her, but personally, I don't think it's in the cards. I don't think that's what she wants in this time of her life. I mean, I'm not discounting anything maybe later, but I just don't see that being something she wants to jump into and focus full force to be the best. Because if she's going to do anything, what I know about her, she's going to do it to be the best. And not that I don't think she can be the best. It's just, I just don't know if her body and her mind at this stage in her life, if that's what's right for her. She's competed her whole life. Her whole life has been about being the best. And I just think personally the best thing for her is just to kind of be okay with herself, not as a fighter. So, I mean, I love her to death, dude. I just know the pain she's gone through physically, doing this forever, multiple surgeries, concussions, broken bones, weight cutting, all those things add up and take its toll, and it's cumulative. So, being 30 years old now and doing this since you were 8 years old nonstop, I mean, the mileage you've put on your body and that she's put on her body, I just don't think if she wants to, live a long, happy life and raise kids with Travis, which I know, that's the future. I just don't think that's something I feel like would be in her best interest.
Mm-hmm. Justin, I think you answered that question as best as you could have, and we really appreciate it. Honestly, there is so much more that we could chat to you. We probably went through about 50% of what we had for you, but we'd love to chat to you in the future. In the meantime, guys, there he is, Justin Flores. You can follow him on Twitter at JFloresPro and Instagram JFlo1979. It has honestly been an absolute pleasure. We gained a lot of insight from you today, Justin, and we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It was a great time and humbled and honored to be able to be on your podcast.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll definitely keep in touch, Justin. We'll let you go because we're actually 2 minutes overdue for our next interview. But yeah, again, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
What's up, fight fans? I'm the Bioshock 2 of mixed martial arts, Tommy Toehold, and International Fight Week is as big as it gets. During the Zuffa era, you were guaranteed at least 5 title fights on International Fight Week, a celebrity making their UFC debut, and a fighter returning from the dead to appear on the card. Now, for the new UFC ownership, this is really their first go-round at the July 4th weekend card, and seeing as we don't really have any fights yet on the show, I thought I'd throw 3 out there that simply need to happen if they want to make UFC 213 International Fight Week as fuck. Matchup number 1, Stipe Miocic versus Demetrius Johnson. If Stipe wins next month, he is the longest reigning heavyweight champion in history. Demetrius Johnson is the longest reigning champion in UFC history. One is gigantic, the other is small. Stipe has to be pretty buzzed, and DJ has to fight on little stilts. It's the fight you never knew you needed to see so bad. Nothing says International Fight Week like a super fight. Make it happen, Dana. The second fight that is an absolute must is Big John McCarthy versus Herb Dean. That's right, the 2 best refs in the sport. You know you've always wondered what would happen if they threw down. Now we finally have an answer. 3 rounds in the heavyweight division. They got a dress in their ref attire. The new old unified rules apply. The kicker, they're also reffing the match themselves. Don't act like you wouldn't pay $60 for that shit. You know you would. We've seen them in the cage for years. It's about time we saw them kick some ass. There can be only one best referee, and they decided at International Fight Week. The third bout that is an absolute must. Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather. I'm not talking about boxing. I'm not talking about MMA. I'm talking about the truest test of a human being. I'm talking about American Gladiators. Conor and Floyd test the limits of their very being as they make their way through Hang Tough, the Atmosphere, Assault, and of course the Eliminator. Make the Gladiators fighters from the UFC roster, and let's decide once and for all which of these two competitors is the greatest of all time at avoiding tennis balls shot at them from various distances. For everybody at Submission Radio, I'm Tommy Toehold. See you on International Fight Week, fight fans!
Fantastic. I guess that settles it. Submission Radio going to International Fight Week because we just simply have to see this Demetrius Johnson versus Stipe Miocic fight, of course. But in all seriousness, UFC, come on. Give us the goods. Give us a sexy matchup. Give us a spicy matchup. Something sexy. We need another main event, and we need to make it worthwhile spending thousands and thousands of dollars to fly all the way to America to cover International Fight Week, because at the end of the day, that's what we do. Anyway, a massive thank you to Tommy Toehold for subbing by the program once again and giving us a nice dose of funny. Don't forget to show Tommy Toehold a lot of love by going to his YouTube channel. There was a time where we would say go to ThS.com. It seems like there's no point anymore because the website is, it says there's a bunch of Asian characters and it says this domain name is for cooperation to discuss! Exclamation point. I'm not sure whether that's actually his website and this is a massive troll job or maybe he's just condensed, done the smart thing, and it's all on his YouTube channel now. But go to his YouTube channel, youtube.com/Tommy Toehold. It's as simple as that. Don't forget to follow him on Twitter at Tommy Toehold. He's one of the best follows when you're watching fights. He's absolutely hilarious. And as always, a massive friend of the program, so we really appreciate everything he does. Anyway, it is time to move on. Thank you so much, Tommy. It is time for our next guest, and I believe he's patiently waiting, and I believe Dennis is on the line right now.
All right, guys. Our next guest is coming off a successful middleweight debut against Hector Lombard back in February. He has now rebuilt himself and will be taking on Tim Boesch in a very fan-friendly matchup at UFC Fight Night 112 in Oklahoma City. He is the big rig himself, Johny Hendricks. Welcome back to the program. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
Doing very well. Happy to be chatting to you. Now, what's interesting about this fight, Johnny, is that your MMA pro debut was actually in Oklahoma City back in 2007, almost 10 years ago. You beat Victor Ratcliffe in the third round by TKO. Did you realize that your 10-year anniversary was coming up? And considering you're undefeated in Oklahoma, where this fight's taking place, are you superstitious at all to be fighting there again?
No. I'm super excited. I've had a lot of success in that building. I won a national title there. I have in Oklahoma done very well. So for me, I'm just sort of excited to get to be able to fight back in Oklahoma.
I mean, that's pretty cool that you're going to be able to do that. Do you remember what went through your mind when you first stepped into that cage that night almost 10 years ago?
Yeah, sort of. First off, can I strike? Am I just going to try to go for takedowns? That was sort of one of my main things. So I told myself I cannot do takedowns. And I was able to win the majority of it. Yeah, I took him down, but at the first round, I would go for the takedown whenever he strike. Excuse me. The second time is second round, I started doing more stand-up. Started staying on my feet a little bit more. Excuse me. And then third round, that was my main focus, is try to win the fight on the feet.
And did you expect back then that you'd be making a 10-year career out of it? Was something you were sort of dabbling in, or did you think this was the big step and the next, almost 10 years of your life are going to be dedicated to this?
Well, you know what? Whenever I started this sport 10 years ago, and that sounds crazy, is that I really wanted to, if I'm going to do it, I wanted to be a UFC champ. That's really my main goal to start. 10 years ago, I still remember people laughing and sort of saying, who is this guy to say that he's going to become a UFC champ? That was sort of my main goal, is if I'm going to do it, I'm going to put everything I have into it and to be the best fighter I can. I've been very lucky to reach majority of my goals, right? And it's sort of the same way now. It's 85, so I'm thinking of it as it's a new beginning. I got to go out there, prove myself every fight, and I want to be a UFC champ again. That's really where my head is. As of right now, that's where my head is at, is how do I become a UFC champ again?
Well, speaking of that, let's go back a couple of months ago to UFC Nova Scotia. Mentally, what did it feel like beating Hector Lombard and getting your first win in almost 2 years? Was it something that you felt you needed to do in order to prove to yourself that you were still capable of sort of fighting and doing it?
You know what? It wasn't even about the win. It was about, am I happy? You know what I mean? That was the first time in 2 years, almost 2 years, I've been happy to fight. That I wasn't just hating life, you know. I talked about retirement, and half of, I'd say 98% of it was the fact that, you know, you do a 3-month camp and 12 or the 3 months you're just focusing on cutting weight, you know, not even really doing much of anything else, but wearing plastics every day, running every day, doing this, doing that. And so now at 85, I don't have to worry about those things. All I get to worry about is training, getting stronger, lifting weights, and having fun again. You know, I have a life again. You know, for example, last year I fought 3 times. So out of 12 months, 9 of them, I was cutting weight. You know what I mean? Like, I was literally trying to do everything I could to hit 170. And now at 85, you know, the last fight, I just had to suffer the week of, and I can't even consider that suffering because the whole time I was thinking I should be doing more. Like, I should be hurting more. I should be running more. I should be doing this more to make weight, right? Because over the last 2 years, it's been that way. Or actually longer. For the last 4 years, it's been, you know, the day of the fight or the day of the weigh-ins, you're busting your butt to get an extra 3 pounds off of you. Where this last fight, I woke up, I was 185.5, and I just decided to drink a half a pound. Just so I could weigh in at 86, and then I end up weighing in at 185.5 anyways. So, you know, it's just one of those things that now I got to switch my mindset to now it's not about how hard you got to cut weight. It's about how much can I improve my skills again.
I think as a fighter, that's the main thing you want to be focusing on. It's amazing that you were so unhappy and suffering for so long. When you were in that fight, was there anything that surprised you about yourself in that fight and the way you were able to perform? Was there anything that you kind of maybe forgot that you were capable of doing and maybe you were sort of reminded in that fight that, wow, this is the Johny Hendricks that I really am, and I haven't been able to do this for the last few years?
Yeah, you know, being able to see punches coming, being able to throw out combinations, you know, off the fly. You know, I see something, boom, boom, boom. Okay, it lands. Continue to do that. Because if you watch let's just even take last year. If I did anything, if I had any type of success, I would never go back to it. And the reason why is because it takes energy. And I'm more concerned of can I get through the 3rd round? Right? Where this last fight, whenever I did that, I was able to continue to do it because my energy level was still there. A lot of people don't realize this, but when you're running as much as you have to and cutting weight the way that I had to, it takes a lot out of you. You know what I mean? The week of the fight, you know, I'm wearing plastics from the day I show up until the day I weigh in, right? That's just the way that it's been. And then all of a sudden, you know, with the IVs, with the IV band, you're not able to put all the stuff, the minerals and everything that you've pulled out of your body, you know, the irons and stuff like that get your mind ticking. And not only that, but also your muscles firing on all cylinders. You try to just, you think you can, but you have to, and you know, I've seen a lot of guys move up and have success. So that's whenever I was like, you know, I'm over it. You know, if I go out there and I have fun at 85, win or lose, that's all I can think about is just enjoyment, right? I love fighting. So if that means that I got to be at 85 and take it 1 or 2 fights to get a little bit, you know, get everything firing like I used to, then that's what I plan on doing. And that's really where my head's been since I moved to 85. Hey, yeah, was I stronger than Hector? Yes. This is, now I'm fighting Tim. Am I going to be stronger than him? Because he came down from 205.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of excited about this. I can't wait to see, if I can go out there and he tries to bully me, and I show him, hey, don't underestimate me. I'm stronger than I look. And he realizes that. What is that going to send to the rest of the 85 division, right? Because you got to think that everybody he fights, he's able to, he's a strong guy. So that's really where I want to defeat him at, is the strength aspect. You know what I mean? Because I know, and one thing that I have that a lot of people don't, is that at 170, they're very fast punchers, right? They're very fast.
Yeah.
And at middleweight, they're not as fast, it doesn't seem like. I haven't been in there with a lot of them, but the ones I'm training with, the ones I'm doing this and this with, I feel like the bigger they are, they're a little bit slower. And it's true in any sport. The more weight you put on, the slower they throw. So if I can keep that aspect, the speed aspect on my side, I think that's going to really separate me in the 85 division.
And we're gonna get to Tim in a second. I'm just curious, Johnny, because look, I think sort of for the longest amount of time, the theory in MMA has always been lose as much weight as you can, get to the lowest weight class possible, and that's where the best outcome for you is going to be. But now, with you moving up to middleweight, we saw Robert Whittaker, for example, someone who was kind of struggling at welterweight, move up to middleweight and really dominate as well. RDA talking about passing out in a bathtub before his fight with Eddie Alvarez, trying to cut weight. It kind of seems like people are starting to realize that cutting as much weight as possible to get to the lowest weight as possible isn't really the smartest way to go about it all. So do you kind of have a different, I suppose, understanding and appreciation of what sort of needs to be done to be successful in the sport? Because I think when you first came in, for someone to say, oh, hey, I'm going to move up to this weight class, even though I can be in this weight class, people would be flipping out. But now it seems like everybody's kind of realizing it.
Well, and a lot of that plays into the IV rule, which I think is a great thing. I'm not harping on it at all, right? I think it's a very smart thing to have. It does hide people. It takes away any avenue for somebody to cheat. You know what I'm saying? So no IVs, you can't mask anything. And so I think that's a great thing to have. What that's showing us is that, guess what? People like me that used to be able to cut 50 pounds, they're not fighting the way they should on the next day. So now people are sitting here going, okay, well, hey, I cut 35, 45 pounds. Should I move up? Then they move up. Once they move up, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't feel like I do whenever I used to cut weight. Like for me, making 185, the next day, I felt like I didn't cut weight because, I'm cutting from 205, 210 to 185. So, you're cutting what, 25 pounds? And really, that's nothing compared to cutting 45. You know what I'm saying? So now you're sitting here going, all right, 40 pounds to cut weight, or you can cut 25, and the next day you'll fight that much better. I think that's where we're saying, hey, without the IVs, putting everything that we're losing in our body the week of the fight, we're able to maintain that, still eat smart, so that we don't have to cut that hard of weight, right? Still eat smart, still be conscious about it, and still train the way it's going to fall off. So whenever we step into the octagon, instead of being, so like my last fight, I think I weighed like 198, 200 whenever I fought. That's usually what I fought at 170. So now instead of trying to gain 30 pounds, my body's gaining 15. And guess what? That 15 pounds isn't weighing on me either. You know what I mean? That extra 15 pounds from 170 to 200, you got to think that now I can train at 200 majority of my camp. I can get used to it. I can do all these things. Where at 70, I had to be I tried to be majority of my camp right around 90 to 87. That's where I'd like to be. At least the last 6 weeks of the camp, right around that weight. And then all of a sudden you would eat and drink back up and you're at 200 pounds. Your body's in shock for the extra 10 pounds.
And I mean, out of all the crazy weight cuts that you've had in your career, what do you think is the biggest amount of weight you've ever cut going into a fight?
So the biggest one I've cut was 218 to 170.
Wow.
In 12 weeks.
So what was the time period? How long did you have to do that?
12 weeks.
12 weeks. Okay. Oh, so that wasn't so much a cut. That was more going down from your starting weight. What about the actual weight cut process, the actual water dehydration process? What was your biggest cut there, John?
Let's see here. Usually, whenever I used to do water loading, I would show up at like 95 and hit 170. But I'm drinking like a little over 3 gallons of water a day.
Oh, wow. And you mentioned the retirement earlier on in the interview, and that's kind of been the story of your last couple of fights, where if you didn't win or if you weren't satisfied with your performance, you said that you were going to retire. You've gotten the win at middleweight. You seem fresh, rejuvenated. Are you able to put that behind you now? Can we eliminate the possibility of Johny Hendricks potentially retiring after this Tim Boetsch fight?
Yes, because guess what? The reason why, I mean, everybody sort of wanted me to move up, I think, because, I know the news people did, because I wasn't doing good interviews anymore. I just hated life at 170, and that's really what it boils down to is 170. Life sucked. I'll be the first one to admit that. But now at 85, like I said, 85, I'm starting to wake up and enjoy. I'm able to have fun. I'm able to do stuff. For example, right before that last fight, I was able to go bow fishing. Prior to that, it's been 3 years before I could do something like that. It just that my whole life revolved around waking up, run, this, work out, eat very, you're eating very clean, you're doing this, and this. And, you want to spend time with your kids, your family. And it's hard to when you're on that kind of a regiment day in and day out. Like I said, in 1 year I had 3 fights, so that's 9 months out of 12. You're trying to do everything you can to get down to 170.
Let's talk about your preparation for this Tim Boetsch fight. What's training camp looking like these days leading into the fight? Are you still running it yourself as opposed to sort of joining a big-time gym?
No, I'm still running it myself. That's the beauty of this is that, now at 85, I have more awareness of what's going on, if that makes sense. Like instead of sitting here saying, all right, Johnny, so for example, I'll give you an example for a 70 fight. All right, I wake up, I go run on Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I wake up and I do my runs, right? And every night I do a little run and a hot tub session almost every night. Okay? And then on Mondays, I would do a striking class. And then at night, I would do a jiu-jitsu or something. But I had to choose which one I did hard, right? Because I couldn't push myself hard for both of them because I was cutting so hard. Where now I'm sitting here going, hey, all right, we're doing jiu-jitsu, we're doing a striking class, and I'm lifting weights all in one day. I have more energy. So now I'm able to add more workouts throughout the week because I know that I'm going to recover in between each one. And if my weight starts getting a little too heavy, I just eat, start intaking some cleaner foods, and then all of a sudden you lose like 6-7 pounds. You just maintain that, right? So within 2 weeks from now, I'll probably be at 200 pounds. And I'm going to try to maintain that for the last 6 weeks, 200 pounds, and where I'm training 2 to 3 times a day. So I'm going to work out 3 days a week. I'm going to do striking 3 days a week. I'm going to do kickboxing twice a week. I'll do jiu-jitsu 2 to 3 days a week. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of things I can add into my workouts now because I'm not trying to decide which one do I need to put energy in, which one is more going to be more efficient. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? All these little details that I had to worry about.
Mm. And I'm just wondering, Johnny, before we get off the topic of weight cutting, I'm wondering if you've ever sort of, I don't know how much you watch fights when you're not in training or doing your own preparation, but I'm wondering if there's ever been a time where you watched another fighter maybe struggle and you think, man, this guy just really needs to do what I've already done, sort of go through the lesson that you've already gone through and move up in weight. And I'm wondering if you have any advice to anyone else out there who's maybe considering whether they should move up or not.
Well, you know what? Like I always say, that's to each their own. I wish I moved up a little earlier. Maybe I don't have those extra 2 losses on my bout. You know what I'm saying? That's sort of where you just got to ask yourself, okay, are you strong enough? Do you have the mental capacity to sit here and say, hey, I'm gaining 15 pounds. Can I compete with these guys on that 15 pounds? And that's where I'm pretty excited about it because I love the challenge of it. And that's really what it is for me. It's the fact that I can sit there and say, people thought I was crazy 4 years ago talking about moving up to 185. 3 years ago, moving up to 185. That's what's driving me right now is the fact that I can look at those people and I can say, no. Told you I was an 85-pounder. Now it's time for me to prove it. And that's really what it is for me. It's just, it's a competition, right? Everything in my life is competition. And that's what's making me excited all over again is knowing that competition.
Yeah, and I mean, you're speaking about goals. It's kind of funny. We have to sort of mention it. I mean, everybody's sort of thinking about it. One of your biggest rivals, George St. Pierre, is also returning, but he is also returning at 185. I mean, what did you think when you saw that he would be returning and to the weight class that you're now currently in?
Well, I can't wait to retire him again. That's really what I've been thinking. I told him, I don't have no disrespect for the guy. He did amazing things, right? But 3 years out of it, things have changed. And he said that I'm washed out. Well, guess what? It's a new Johnny at 185. And I cannot wait for him to see, I can't wait to see how this happens because win or lose, I think he should come after me. I think I should get that loss back. Realistically, we still don't. It is what it is, but I would like to do it again. I really do. And this time, he thought I was strong at 70. Wait until he feels me at 85 when I'm not killing myself to make weight, when I'm not killing myself just to focus on my weight cut. What is he going to think after the 185-pound match whenever I'm totally focused on one thing and one thing only? Doing what I did, but better. That's really where my head's at. It's right there.
You've mentioned how you're looking at going for gold, but what's more important for you in the middleweight division if you had to choose between fighting GSP or getting a title shot? Would that rematch with GSP be more tempting for you than getting that title? What sort of stands out as the more important thing?
No. More important is always the title. Hey, like I said, yeah, I wish I could fight him again, but if they said, hey, Johnny, you know how to fight George or you can go for the belt, I'm going to pick the belt every day because if he doesn't have it, then he's not on my radar. The only reason he's on my radar right now is because guess what? If he does beat Bisbee, then I want him. Like I said, my goal is to take that belt away and retire him again. That's all that I can think of. But if he doesn't win, and they say you got to fight Bisping, then I'd choose Bisping over him any day of the week.
It's interesting because he obviously he's a huge name and he's come back and the UFC have thrown him into this title picture, even though there's a lot of guys that are already waiting for it. I'm wondering if, let's say he does beat Bisping, I'm wondering if you think he can, and if he does, do you think he sort of owes it to the division to stick around, maybe defend the belt at least once or a couple of times?
Oh yeah, he does. I think that's the whole point of being a title, winning the belt is to sit here and say, hey, I made a decision to come out of retirement to go for a belt. After I win it, try to defend it once or twice. Now, if he can't, then he wants to go back to retirement, then do it. But if he does and he continues to defend it, then you can sit there and say, all right, he might be the best fighter ever.
And I mean, just quickly on that matchup, how do you see that going? Do you see him beating Bisping, or do you think the size difference, the time away from the cage, Bisping remains champion?
You know what? That one is tough. Okay, and yes, it is size. Is the size going to affect me? But you know what? I've been fighting guys bigger than me all my life. I really don't care. I don't care about size. Size means nothing. Now, how to use that size? Like, for example, GSP. They said that he could jab me to death. I don't think he hit me that many times with his jab out of 5 rounds. So size is only if you allow it to be there. And can he handle the weight of an 85-pounder for 15 or 25 minutes? That's the question. Like, even me, I'm pretty excited to see what I can do with Tim Boesch for 15 minutes. Can I handle his size? Can I do this? And that's why I'm saying I want to beat him at his own game. And that means I want to beat him with the size aspect. I want to show the world that I can compete at 85. I don't care how big or how strong people say they are. They haven't ran into me yet.
Wow.
And that's really, really important to me to prove that. So that way I can move forward at the 185 division, and everybody will start to say, okay, even though he's 5'9.5", he's still beating up guys just like he did in the welterweight division with 74, 76, inch reach. It doesn't matter.
Well, Johnny, we're excited for this rebirth, and we're very excited for this very fan-friendly fight against Tim Boesch. Just as we let you go, do you have a prediction for how you're beating Tim Boesch on June 25th at UFC Fight Night 112?
Sort of like I've been talking about. My goal is, I want to go out there and show the world that, hey, I can handle big guys. I am a big guy myself, and I plan on, I want to finish. That's really what I've been talking about, boxing coach. I want to get back to being accurate like I used to be. That was one of my greatest attributes, is not being able to hit hard. I know I have that, but being accurate. That's where I want to get back to, because if I can be accurate, I'm hurting people with not being accurate. As soon as I start with the accuracy that I want to have, as soon as I get that back, I'll start finishing people again, and that's really what I want to do.
Guys, make sure to follow Johnny on Twitter and Instagram at Johny Hendricks, and see him fight Tim Boesch, UFC Fight Night 112 in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. We can't wait to see the fight. Johnny, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you on Submission Radio.
Hey, thank you guys, and y'all have a wonderful day.
Hey guys, this is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is a real veteran of the sport and a true definition of a fighter. He's taking on Demian Maia, the stacked UFC 211, in a fight that has some serious title implications for the welterweight division. And he is currently on his easy money tour. He is none other than Jorge Gamebrad Masvidal. Jorge, welcome to Submission Radio. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. Pleasure to be on here talking to the Australian fans. I've met a lot of Australian people in my time in training. Some of the best people that I've met come from Australia, man. So I'm honored to be doing this job.
Very nice, very nice. What a great compliment. We're happy to be a couple of those people. And speaking of being around the world, we saw recently, Jorge, you were in Colombia. What were you doing there, and how was your trip?
Oh, it was awesome. It went smooth. I had a couple seminars and appearances to do, and just spreading MMA through South America. I happen to speak Spanish as my first language, so it was like a no-brainer for me to get sent over there and just show what I know, and just keep spreading the love.
We imagine it would be an amazing trip. Is there a favorite part of the trip? Anything stand out to you that you could share with us?
The food, I've always grown up eating like Latin food, but it's always a little different when you get there, It's a little slight different seasonings and things like that. And their fruits, their vegetables, they grow a little bit different than they do like in America. A lot of our food is like shitty in our ingredients too, because everything's processed. So it's always awesome to go to like a country from where that particular food comes and eat like fresh ingredients and not like a bunch of preservatives or steroids in your food, So that was a real treat to me.
Yeah, we're big foodies, so we feel you there, Hoy. You actually took a picture outside of a restaurant with the hashtags, I don't know what it is, hashtag it's good, hashtag cat, hashtag rat. Did you find out what it was? And please tell us you didn't end up eating any cats or rats, Jorge.
Yeah. It's these rats. I think they're like part of the gerbil family, or I'm not sure, but they get up to like 120 pounds.
Wow.
You know, they're really big. You know, yeah, they're really big. They're really gamey. If you like gamey meat and salty meat, you'll like them. I've had other things like alligator and ostrich, bison, things like that. And I like those meats, but I wasn't too much of a fan of this rat. It was real gamey, real salty.
Oh, wow, there you go. All right, so let's talk about this easy money tour, Jorge. Demian Maia, you know, he's not exactly somebody who other fighters are calling out. His skill set presents a lot of problems for a lot of guys, and you, on the other hand, openly called him out. What made you want to fight him so much?
Well, we had sat down, me and my manager, and we picked a couple fights that would be good for me, stylistically. You know, Jake Ellenberger was part of that process. Then after Jake, business got handled. Cowboy was on the radar always forever. So when we had the opportunity to jump on Cowboy, we jumped on it, you know. So it was a no-brainer. And then the next toughest fight after that is Demian Maia. I thought, you know, not that it's the toughest for me, but it's the guy that nobody really wants to fight in the division. And I'm here to fight, man. You know, you can't beat a guy like Cowboy and a guy like Demian Maia back to back if you're not a well-rounded fighter, you know. And I've been doing this for a long time. I don't got time to keep proving to the UFC how good I am. So just give me the best guys you got and let's get the ball rolling. And if I'm not meant to be at this level, then we'll find out come May 13th. But if I am as good as I say I am, then the world will see, and then we know what's next. It's a title shot, you know. No other way around it.
Yeah. And I mean, after the Cowboy fight, you said that you've beaten better fighters outside the UFC. I'm wondering, obviously, Damian's a tough guy. That's where you're fighting him. But where does Demian rank in terms of your past opponents? Is he the stiffest test for you, or do you think you've already overcome bigger challenges in the past?
I know I've overcome bigger challenges in the past by far. Just not the fight alone, but like implications that happen on fight week, me getting sick and pulling through that to get the victory and things like that. Overall, in my life, I've done way taller mountains I've climbed than Demian Maia. Demian Maia is a one-bladed sword. He's a dude that's good at only one thing. Almost damn near impossible for these low-level grapplers. You know, guys that can't wrestle back into him, he's like a god to them because he's going to get them down on the mat. But now when you got somebody like me that can wrestle back into a dude, it's a problem. You know, you see me fight good grapplers. They spend more time on their back than I do. Nobody's ever taken me down to UFC and rid me out. And when I mean ridden out, like 30 seconds or more, you know, and that's probably like the longest I've been on my back. It's not going to be no different with Maia, you know. He's going to get to my leg, we're going to scramble, and I'm going to continue to out-scramble him. And when he feels that pressure, when he feels, hey, man, I'm wrestling here with a guy that knows how to wrestle, that's what's going to kill him in the mind, because he probably thinks I can't wrestle, you know. Or he probably does know that I can wrestle, and he's going to drop guard. But either way, it's not going to be his night.
I mean, when you look at his past fights and the success that he's had, where do you think Damian's past opponents have gone wrong in their approach to fending off his takedowns and the ground game?
Them dudes can't wrestle. They can't even spell wrestle. They can't spell sprawl. You know, they you know, it's a different league, you know. Some guys are really good strikers and they put everything into that. This is not a striking match. This is not Muay Thai. This is not boxing. You got to be able to stop a takedown if you want to be at the top of the food chain. I've invested a big part of my life into this game, and a big part of my game is wrestling, not because I need it to win, but because I love it. Now, it helps that I'm good at it and I can win fights, but I love to wrestle. I love to get on the mat, put my mouthpiece on, and wrestle. We go hard 2 hours. We drill an hour hard, and then we go live hard. And I'm not wrestling with a guy that does Muay Thai or kickboxing. You know, I'm wrestling with the guys that wrestle their whole life from 7 years old, and they're slamming me all over the place. But guess what? I've gotten better and better and better. I go to universities and stay there for a month just wrestling with guys that all they do is they wrestle, and they kick my ass. But you know what? I got better every trip. I kept going back. Now when I go to these places, I could hold my own. I'm not beating these studs, but I could hold my own. A guy like Damian has never felt this type of wrestling defensively in his life. Now, he's better with the gi. He's real good at throwing arm bars and rear naked chokes and all that jiu-jitsu stuff, but he's not going to get to those positions on me. It's a different animal.
Yeah, and we've heard you say many times about, your love of wrestling and especially the tough mindset of it. That's one of the things that stands out to you. Have you sort of felt the need to focus on more of it sort of than usual in preparation during this camp? Or do you feel like all those years of investing the time, going to universities, you've sort of already, I guess, got it under your belt and you don't need to have an extra focus for this camp?
No, definitely I needed to have usually I focus on my tools for a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't worry about what they do, I focus on my tools. But for Demian, we put a little bit extra in the wrestling department, to make sure that I'm on point, that my reflexes are sharp, From camp to camp, you kind of lose tools, you forget about certain things because I'm fighting a guy that has maybe a devastating left hand or a right hand, and I can't fight him with my hands low because, he has a really good a high kick or something, so I got to have him up. So my wrestling defense, it kind of switches, and I start wrestling from the hip as opposed to using my head and arms to be the first defense, So from guy to guy, you gotta pick your strategies and pick your battles. For Demian, I had to go back in the mat, resharpen some tools, and make sure they're ready to go,
Mm-hmm. And I mean, other than the wrestling, how do you see the fight playing out? What do you think is the most likely scenario?
The most likely scenario is that I get in there, we start exchanging shots. He fake pretends to stand up with me like he does with everybody. He gets to my leg at one point or another, and he gives it all he's got to take me down, and I stuff that takedown. We get back to our feet. I start peppering him up. He does the same thing again. He's going to get to my leg, and then he's going to think, I got him tired, which that guy will never outgas me. He gets to my leg again. The same thing happens. At that point, either like on the second or third attempt, I think he's going to drop guard. And I think when he drops guard, a lot of guys back up and they give him those 3-4 seconds of time, I won't give him no time ever to break. Whether he's dropping guard, whether I take him down, whether he takes me down, he'll never catch a break with me. If he's on top of me, I'm out. He still won't catch a break because I'm moving the whole time. I don't stop. Guys take me down, I'm moving. It's something you got to develop, and the only way to develop it is by doing it. And you know why guys don't get good at it? Because it sucks. Most fighters, a lot of them are pussies when it comes to that department. They don't want to get beat up in the wrestling department because it takes all the energy. You have to get up and get away from a good grappler. When you got a guy that's strong, that knows how to wrestle, man, it takes a lot to get away from them. To do that day in and day out, it takes a different mindset. You have to wrestle at that level, and that's something that Maia hasn't felt. Now, I'm not saying I'm the greatest grappler ever. I could be popping up, maybe get leg locked or something crazy. But more times than not, when he gets to my leg, I'm going to out-scramble that guy.
I love it. I love how vivid the prediction is. You can tell that you visualized this many times. I'm wondering because Jorge, you've mentioned in the past about wanting to bet Dana White $200,000 that he can't find anybody at welterweight that can beat you. Have you spoken to him about it, and has he taken you up on the offer? Will it be in play for this fight?
I wish it was in play for this fight, man. I wish, man. We reached out to him. It was no comment. It was like, just fight this guy, and then there was no implications of a bet, So, I mean, I don't think any bet will be made, but I still got the money. The money's there. It's on hold. If Dana calls me tomorrow and he goes, hey, you know what? I'm going to take you up on the bet. I think Maia's got your number. That money's going into an escrow account, and the winner will take the money.
Wow.
I mean, it's a fascinating bet. Just to sort of talk to us about that confidence, because obviously you had some very good and close fights against Benson Henderson and Lorenz Larkin that maybe didn't go your way. What's changed? What is it that makes you believe you've turned the corner to where nobody at 170 can beat you?
Well, I always felt like that, but I was at 55 and I wasn't getting the love that I felt I needed. I had lost one fight. There was another controversial loss, and I was 5-1 at one point at 155. 3-win fight streak or a 4-win fight streak. I think it was like 3 fights. Yeah, 3-fight win streak. And I just wanted the bigger names, But my mind wasn't really in it. I wasn't training full time, dedicated to it because I was getting these opponents that I never even heard of. I'm like, why am I getting these guys? This is a step back. I've been fighting already for a long time. A lot of my counterparts from Strikeforce, guys that I beat up, they hopped over to the UFC and they had top 10 guys that I embarrassed, guys that I took the food off their plate and ate it, and they were getting top 10 opponents. It was blowing my mind. I'm like, when's my break? Maybe after this next fight, okay, I beat this guy, submit that guy, I beat this guy, I beat that guy, okay, the top 10 dude is coming now. Guess what? No top 10 guy at 55. I moved up to 70. Anyways, at 55, it was killing my body. At 70, I was just like, man, if they're not going to give me big names, I'm not even going to train for these guys, But the ball started rolling. I got Jake, which was ranked. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my heart and soul into this one more time, see how far I could go with this, And after Jake, I got my gift wrap present of Donald Cerrone, which everybody in their mama thought that dude's going to walk through me. There's no scenario where that guy beats me, and now guys see that and go, bro, don't even put them together. That's not fair. Now people see it. They didn't see it then because the UFC is not pushing me. They're not branding me out there, And I'm not a fucking whore on social media doing all that crazy shit, So now people know I could scrap when it comes to standing up. If people are about to find out right now, if they don't already know, how good my grappling defensively is.
I mean, that's fascinating. I'm just curious, have you ever had an opponent in the UFC that, there was no name value and you just didn't really train for them at all?
Man, I don't like to say too much on that subject, but if you talk to my coaches like Mike Brown or a couple of my other coaches, they'll tell you 3-4 week training camp, let's go. The weight was on point. Let's go. Come on, let's scrap. Because I like to fight. At the end of the day, I love to fight. That's why I do this. The media, the picture taking, the running 3 miles at 12 o'clock at night because I'm a little bit overweight. I don't really like that. The dieting, I don't really like that. I like sparring, I like wrestling, things like that. But there's a lot of things I don't like. So when I get an opponent that I'm like, man, why are they doing me like this? A lot of times I didn't train. Now you better believe I'm lifting weights 4 or 5 times a week. I'm running, I'm swimming, I'm doing everything I can to destroy my body, to build it up. So when that fateful day comes on May 13th, there's no excuses from this side. I'm just ready to go with everything I got.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned before how you were sort of, when you were a little bit unmotivated, you wanted to give it one more shot. When you say one more shot, what exactly do you mean? Was there any contemplation on your part of maybe, I don't know, you obviously love fighting, but did you ever think about retiring or doing something else? Or if you didn't get this push, anything like that?
Not retiring, but I was like, man, this is, I'm not going to, I'm going to have to pick up like something on the side to do, and then I'll just train 3-4 weeks for these guys that they're giving me and just live that lifestyle. I wasn't living that year-round training. My mind was in it, but it wasn't really in it. I was thinking, man, I could go to boxing. I'll start from the bottom of boxing. In 2 years, I'll have 20 fights. Maybe I can make a nice payday because at the same time, we're not fighting big-name guys. I'm not getting big money. We're fighting Joe Blow and Joe Dirt. They don't give a fuck. They're not going to pay me money. So that's another thing that hurt me a lot. Like I could beat all these guys. They could line them up, all these Ultimate Fighter winners and up-and-comers. I'm never going to get the money I want or deserve. Now things have changed. Now I can fight for the title and be making the most money out of everybody in the whole UFC roster because I can have that belt wrapped around my waist, God willing. So things change now,
And I mean, a big win over Cowboy Cerrone, now Demian Maia. Do you feel like you're in a position now where the UFC will sort of begin to push you a bit more and push your name out there a bit more now that you're sort of more on the big stage and versing a lot of these bigger names?
No, I don't think so. I think that they probably think that, tell you the truth, man, I don't know what they think. I don't know if they're going to push me or not. I know that the matchmakers and things like that, if you ask them, they'll tell you I'm one of the hardest dudes to get matched up. I'm one of the dudes that's had the most fights turned down. So they know because of the fighters, from them calling somebody and go, hey, you're going to fight Masvidal. And they're like, you know what? I'm injured. And they're like, hey, but wait, you just called me yesterday asking for a fight. Now I'm giving you one and you're injured? Okay, whatever. Call the next guy. Hey, you want to fight Masvidal? No, that's not the fight I was looking for. So they know that I'm a fucking nightmare. But I don't think they're going to push me like they're going to push me like they do a lot of these guys. That I don't think is going to happen until I have the belt wrapped around my waist.
And has anyone confirmed to you that this is basically you're fighting for a title shot? Because everyone's kind of looking at it and saying Demian Maia's on this big streak. If he wins, he's going to get a title shot. But I feel like because you've sort of come out of nowhere and really not out of nowhere, obviously you've had a massive career, but people only started taking notice after the Cerrone fight. I'm just wondering, has anyone confirmed to you that this is your title shot? Has the UFC confirmed this to you?
Nothing's written on paper. And if it's not written on paper, my brother, it means shit to me. You know what I'm saying? Because they could turn around and GSP is coming at 170 now, and boom, George, you got sidelined. That could happen, Maybe another WWE star crosses over. Who knows? There's a bunch of craziness and madness. But if anybody's more deserving of a title shot than Maia, it blows my mind. Now, if I beat Maia, because Maia's clear the number one contender in my head. If I beat Maia, if I'm not the most deserving dude of that title, then, it's just too much politics involved in it. It's just too much who could sell the most, who this, who that, I don't see them skipping me if I beat Maia, especially if I do my job. You know, I don't see him bypassing me. Anything can happen in this sport.
I mean, one of the interesting dynamics here is that if you face Tyron Woodley for the title, it's kind of like you guys are fighting between teammates. Even though he spends a lot of time at Roof for Sport these days, you're both longtime ATT guys. How would you describe your relationship with him?
Oh, I'm super cool with Woodley, man. He's I wouldn't say we're like fucking best friends, but he's really cool. I've known Woodley 9+ years, 10+ years. We've worked out together plenty. He's one of the guys who used to slam me all around the place. I was at 155. He was at 170 pounds, and he was just the wrestler that is a superpower. You know, 2-time All-American, big, explosive, and he had the wrestling experience. So that was one of the dudes that got my wrestling a little better. You know, from going with guys like that. So me and Woodley know each other real well. You know, he knows where my strengths are. I know where his strengths are. So when it comes to fight time, it won't be no magic or nothing crazy like that, you know?
But you mentioned when it comes to fight time, he obviously knows you very well and he knows that you want that belt. What happens if you get this title shot? Have you guys already spoken about the dynamic of, you know, you guys fighting each other despite your teammates? And is that basically all settled and all fine between you guys?
Well, like I've always told the media, I've never talked about fighting Robbie or fighting Woodley or anything because I've always said the same thing. You know what? When I cross that bridge, we'll talk about it. You know, now I'm about to cross the bridge. So it's God willing, I cross this bridge and I beat Maia, then we'll talk about it. You know, I still got another guy ahead of me that I never underestimate nobody. So my main focus is Maia. Now, if God willing, I get to erase this dude, then we're fighting 100% for sure. You know, that's a no-brainer. I didn't get into this into this game to high five with people. You know. I play like if one rugby player leaves the team and goes to another rugby team and now they meet in the championship, are the guys going to sit out because they used to be teammates? Hell no. They need to get paid. Same here. I need to get paid.
I mean, people are trying to figure out who Tyron's next opponent's going to be, but he's already stated on social media that he started training camp for his next opponent, and he's also stated that he's targeting UFC 213 as the date and event. Would that be enough time for you to prepare for a potential 5-round title fight if things with Demian Maia go to plan?
I would like to say 1,000,000%, but I am stepping into a fight. I don't know that if the kick that I take Maia's head off with, I explode my foot and I can't run. So now, you know, I'm impaired. You know, I'm going into this fight with a broken hand or anything like that. So I would love to say for me that date would be phenomenal, but I have a fight ahead of me. So I never underestimate no man that match. You know, like there's a couple dudes that have been like, I don't need to train for that guy. But as far as fighting goes, you could get an injury out of nowhere. You know, maybe I get into a scramble, I pop a little ligament, I need some time to rehab. I would like to say that date is fine with me. But I can't say 100% sure, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I guess one of the things that people are sort of looking at is it does kind of look like Nick Diaz will be taking on Woodley at 213, but nothing's set in stone, which would possibly mean there's a matchup there between you and Nick Diaz. I mean, is that something that excites you, possibly having the opportunity to fight Nick Diaz if Nick is the champion once you beat Demian Maia?
You know, that wouldn't excite me at all if he skipped me. Because I can't think of the last time that he fought at 70, you know, and the last guy that he beat at 70. So in this game, to me, in my opinion, it should be if you're fighting and you're winning, then, you know, praise and worship be to you and then get this money. But if you're just sitting out on the sidelines or whatever, I don't think I should get skipped by any man at this point, you know. But that is a strong possibility. The UFC could just call me and be like, hey, you got to sit this out. Nick Diaz is fighting Woodley, and then you'll get the winner of that. That's a possibility, you know. I don't have that much power over the UFC.
Sure. As we let you go, Jorge, you went skiing in Denver after your win over Cerrone. What do you think you'll do to celebrate in Dallas, Texas after you beat Maia? Anything you want to do over in Dallas?
Oh, well, fuck up those barbecues, man.
Yeah.
I'm a big food connoisseur. The Texas barbecues, the Mexican places, because the Mexican food in Florida ain't that good, you know. So I'll be messing up the Mexican places, the barbecue. I just eat, man. I'm a simpleton. I like to eat, you know. A lot of times I went to sleep hungry, and not just because I was cutting weight. So now I probably put too much stock into food. If I could just have good food, that's a good day for me.
Yeah.
But that's my after party. I'll be picking out. My hotel room will be filled with all the food I wanted to eat for the whole week.
Oh, wow. Don't forget to invite us. I feel like you'll be doing the easy money tour, and then you'll be doing the barbecue afterwards, and Dallas won't know what hit them. So we're excited, man. Guys, don't forget to follow Jorge on Twitter and Instagram at GameBredFighter. He'll be taking on Demian Maia at UFC 211 May 13th in Dallas, Texas, and because of the time difference, it will be May 14th here in Australia. Jorge, thank you so much for chatting with us. We really appreciate it. Good luck in the fight.
Thank you guys, man. I love my Australian fans. Some of the best people I've ever met come from that island, man. So big shout out to Australia, man.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys. Our next guest from his amazing work in the world of MMA. You can catch him weekly with Mike Dice on Fansided's Extra Rounds podcast. His articles are also available across mixedmartialarts.com and now FloCombat. He is a friend of the program. Elias Cepeda, welcome back to Submission Radio. It's good to have you, man.
Man, it's great to be back, gents. Thanks for having me.
You are a very, very busy man. We'll be talking about that a little bit later, but some exciting things happening in the world of Cepeda that we have to talk about near the end. A lot of stuff to talk about. But one of the first things we want to touch on is UFC Nashville. Now, you were actually there covering the event, and there were some things that happened during the event that, we really want to sort of break down and discuss. And one of the first things was obviously that huge win for Mike Perry over Jake Ellenberger. Elias, you were cage side for the fight and you saw that brutal finish. Just talk to us a little bit about what your thoughts were when you saw the way that Mike was able to finish Jake.
Yeah, it was what struck me is I thought it was kind of like, I don't know if this is the right phrasing, but it was kind of like a symbolic microcosm of Jake Ellenberger, who I think is a phenomenal fighter, of his entire career. Like right before that big elbow that knocked him out, he was dropped with I believe with a punch that put him down and hurt him, and pretty much that was pretty much the beginning of the end there. And he should have stopped there, but he was too tough. He tried to get up, he got up to his feet, and he ate one last shot that made it go ugly. And it's it just kind of just feels like that's what's happening with Jake Ellenberger's career, who's a very young man, but a grizzly old athlete, and he's been taking a lot of damage in fights in recent years. He's a guy that his talent and skill wise was always one of those guys that could beat anyone in any given night in his division, a really great division. And lately, the results have just been precipitously worse and worse, and he's getting hurt more and more, and it's just it's been too much basically, and he should probably stop. But yeah, it was a nasty elbow. He threw his own and didn't cover. You gotta cover an elbow, an elbow strike coming towards you when you throw your own, and it didn't work out that way for him. It was rough. It was a pretty bad and pretty impressive knockout, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, certainly. And we all know Jake. He's been on the show a number of times. Nice guy, a very, very skilled martial artist, but you can't sort of ignore the fact that he has been TKO'd quite a lot recently. If you just go through his record, it's very blatantly clear to see how much damage he's taken. No real word from Jake as to whether he's going to retire, hang up the gloves, or what he's going to do. But if you're sort of looking at it from a health perspective, Elias, is it a situation where you have to take some time, at least after a loss like that, to sort of make sure everything's functioning properly, make sure the brain has time to recover? Do you take some time away from the octagon to at least let your brain physically recover as much as it can from a finish like that?
Ideally, right? Like the tough thing is, these guys and girls don't really have that luxury with the very relatively little money they make. They're prize fighters, and they have to, by and large, most of them have to fight in order to make money. So it's a tough situation where, you at the very least, you should take time off. But oftentimes the UFC gives the call back to people just not long after they've been knocked out to fight again. So they have a lot of pressure to get back in there from the outside, and certainly they have their own pressure internally. They're very competitive, and Jake seems like a nice guy, and he's a great fighter. Like, just to be clear, and I know you guys understand it, but just to be clear for listeners, I know Diego Sanchez kind of took things personally, and I understand why they would when people were talking about him possibly needing to retire. It's not saying that he's not a good fighter or that he's a less of a word. It's just that's the cruel world of Jake is probably more skilled and more knowledgeable than he's ever been, It's not that he's getting worse. It's just that you take more and more damage and your reflexes slow more and more, and it's just something that's bad for your health, like you said. So I would hope he would take some time to think about it and see how he recovers. Then again, I mean, I'm not a scientist, and the studying of these things is still developing even among scientists. But there's some things you never get back, right? Like it's not just like a torn biceps that hopefully you get surgery on and it heals. And there's some things with regards to the brain and damage of it that will never come back, in my view. So he's got to think about that. He's a very, very young dude. I think he's younger than me. He's just been doing it for so long.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be one of the cases in the sport where down the line, when the research is actually found out, and I mean, we all saw some of the research coming out at the NFL level there, the brain damage and how can it impact later life. I think it's going to be one of those things when we do find out the extent of the impact that fighters go through with their brain after that many knockouts, that much damage. I think a lot of careers will have to be cut short once we find out exactly what the damage is and what it does to them, and when there's an actual test that can tell us that. But Casper, I mean, what do you think is next for Mike Perry? And also, in regards to Jake Ellenberger, do you agree with me and Elias? Do you want to see him take a break, or do you sort of see him fighting someone else?
Yeah, I definitely think he should take a break at the very least. I know a lot of people are talking about him potentially getting cut or even worse, retiring. Not to say that's worse. I mean, that might be a good direction, but I think he should probably get at least one more chance. I mean, I think he's, 2-7 in his last 9, and as far as him being KO'd and TKO'd, he's actually only been KO'd and TKO'd 4 times in his career, which I say only. It's obviously extremely bad for him, but you almost, when you hear that number, you think, wow, Jake Ellenberger, I thought it was a little bit more. But when you look at his record, in some ways, he's kind of moving backwards. He's lost to a lot of the top guys in the welterweight division, guys like Robbie Lawler, Robbie McDonald, Stephen Thompson, Kelvin Gastelum, Jorge Masvidal, and now he's sort of losing to sort of lower ranked guys like the Safadines, like Mike Perry. But also in saying that, you can also add a few asterisks that he is losing to the top guys, but against Masvidal, that was just a bizarre fight. His foot got stuck in the fence. It was ruled a TKO. I'm not really going to get into the rules or not, but he was clearly defending himself. I think he needs to take a break, reset, and look, he's losing now to unranked guys. I think he's at a bit of a crossroads where he needs to look at his career and what he really wants to achieve, because if it is becoming a UFC champion, those chances are sort of diminishing. If he's happy to sort of be a gatekeeper or a bit of an action fighter, then maybe he can continue. But at the same time, even like Elias said, even if your skills are improving, but your body just isn't willing to cooperate, then that might be something else to consider. So I don't have an opponent for him, but I think for anyone saying he should retire or be cut, I think he deserves at least one more chance. Mike Perry, on the other hand, I think he looked pretty good in the fight. I mean, the first round, he looked like he was very much defense-orientated as opposed to, say, his past fights or the Alan Jouban fight. It looks like maybe his days of brawling are sort of, coming to an end. He looked like he was more using his jab, very, very focused on moving backwards, something that we didn't really see much of in the past. And then, I mean, the stupendous knockout of the year candidate, and then the breakdancing afterwards, looking like Agent Mulder from The Simpsons when he held up his ID badge. I'm thinking maybe a guy like Santiago Ponzinibbio, maybe sort of sneak him in there in the rankings and give him a good test.
Yeah, and I think with a guy like Mike Perry, the UFC loves these guys. They come out there, they deliver finishes, or they go down themselves. So they'll probably give him possibly a matchup like that, and sort of even maybe give him a bit of a push, because I mean, a guy like that in the co-main event of a fight night card will always deliver ratings from the UFC's perspective. But let's talk about the big win for Iaquinta. I mean, he returned against Diego Sanchez after some time off selling houses. He was on this show before, spoke about the sort of tough situation he was in, where he wasn't really making the money that he wanted to make, but at the same time, it really seemed like he missed fighting. So he did make his comeback. I mean, Elias, I feel like we're sort of harping on this retirement subject a little bit on this episode today, but I mean, Diego Sanchez, I mean, he's another guy that's been in the sport for a really, really long time. He's got a special place in our heart because he was one of the first guys that we really sort of did a first face-to-face interview when he was down here in Australia when we first started our shindig, and he's always been a really, really great guy and someone that I've always been a huge fan of. I mean, the first Ultimate Fighter was a classic one, but again, and you were cage side for this, another finish where, he took some damage to his brain, went down, and you ponder these things, you wonder these things because you care about these guys so much. Is it nearing to a close? Should it be nearing to sort of a retirement for Diego, considering all the punishment he's been through?
Yeah, I think because of that and that alone, I mean, Diego Sanchez is a phenomenal fighter. He's had amazing accomplishments in multiple divisions. He's there's really nothing not to like about Diego Sanchez. His fighting spirit. I mean, he's just awesome. I don't know him personally. He just seems like a great fighter. There's nothing not to love about him. But yeah, I mean, he's been slurring his speech noticeably worse and worse in recent years, and he's a very young dude. And yeah, I think we were all there, right? But at UFC 200, where he got hurt pretty bad by Joe Lozon. So this is 2 fights in a not very long period of time in which he's been hurt. And he was pointing out, hey, this is the only time I've been knocked out cold. That's fine. It doesn't necessarily matter if your brain is jarred that badly and so in such a short period of time repeatedly, that's cause concern. And yeah, he just he looked really good against Jim Miller actually. But yeah, he's just been losing more than he wins. And when you're a great fighter, whenever that happens, that's a little bit scary. To say nothing of getting finished, to say as a result of brain trauma, to say nothing of the fact that a very young human being is slurring his speech worse and worse before our eyes. I mean, it just seems obvious that he should stop.
I'm with you on the speech slurring. I think everyone's pretty much noticed that. And he had that very heartfelt Instagram post where he seemed very defensive and sort of called out a lot of the doubters and the haters over wanting to see him retire. And I don't think it's really that at all. I think a lot of people just care about him. And for him to say that it's the first time that he's been knocked out cold. You mentioned it's not the first time he's been stopped by strikes, but in his mind, it's the first time that he's actually been out cold. To say that and to really hinge on that as your argument would be to completely ignore the thing that he's most known for, and that's his wars. It's not so much about being knocked out cold. It's about the cumulative strikes that he's taken in his career. When you think Diego Sanchez, I don't think anyone's really said, look, Diego is the best grappler. He is the best striker. He has the best knockout power. When people think Diego Sanchez, people think, well, he may very well have the best heart in MMA. And what that generally means, if you have heart, is you get beaten down, or you get knocked down, or you overcome adversity in his fights. And he has had an entire career's worth of adversity to overcome, and he's been, in so many wars and hit in the head so many times, and he's provided us with so many great moments. But, even if only now his chin is starting to fade and he's starting to get knocked down, and we've seen countless fighters. Chuck Liddell had a granite adamantium chin before it went. Nogueira was known for pretty much the same thing, being in these wars, and towards the end he didn't have a chin. So many other fighters have gone through it, and I'm not necessarily saying Diego should retire right now. I mean, he's sort of looking at it as, look, I made a mistake, and I'm gonna fix these mistakes, but he definitely needs to start thinking about it. For me, what's more worrying is his attitude is something that we love about him, but it may end up being a detriment, and that's sort of the heart inside and outside the octagon. I think he's a guy that's really going to have to... I don't think he's going to retire willingly. I think someone at some point is going to have to sit him down, and he might be forced to retire, like Chuck Liddell, like Nogueira, and those guys. I hope that in the back of his mind, he is at least somewhat thinking about retirement, because I would hate for it to be another 5, 6, or however many brutal knockout losses in a row before he really starts thinking about it and, maybe getting that message. But I mean that with all due respect.
I agree, and I think this might be a situation where the UFC sort of draws a line in the sand, and Dana gives him a call and says, "Look, enough's enough. Maybe we can offer you something on the side, or maybe you can do something on the side," because the UFC knows Diego Sanchez has a name that's going to draw interest to their cards. So for them, even if he loses, he'll still have a lot of people watching his fights. There's a lot of upside to sending him out on sort of a more average sort of paycheck and getting people to watch some of these prelims or fight night cards. But I think someone in the company needs to sort of sit down and say, look, we're not going to send him out anymore. We're going to tell him, all right, one more and that's it. Or at least have an honest discussion about it with him. I actually thought he really should have retired when he won against Marcin Held in November last year. I thought, hey, this is a nice moment. It's in Mexico City, Mexico. You win this fight. I thought, hey, why not retire in a positive? But I think, I don't know, it might have to come to that where somebody actually literally stops sending him out there, because I think as long as you send him out there, I think he'll keep going out there. He's got that belief in himself, and it's just tough to switch that around. But at least I want to talk to you about another aspect of this fight that I guess got the MMA's world on notice, and that's obviously the battle between Iaquinta and the UFC. We all saw he had that big appearance on the MMA Hour and sort of spoke about the fact that the UFC sort of uses its post-fight bonus list, the $50,000, as sort of a way to, I suppose, if you're not in the UFC's good graces, you're not going to get your post-fight bonuses. And he's never received a post-fight bonus over his 10-fight UFC run since TUF. And he feels like he was banned from even getting the chance last year due to his disagreement with the UFC officials over an Instagram post. So, what are your thoughts on these statements and his thoughts on what's actually going on with these post-match, I suppose, bonuses?
Yeah, he's right. I mean, I think that's just structurally. I mean, let's if fans can, let's get a little bit beyond Iaquinta sounding like a bro jock or whatever, and listen to the actual stuff he's saying. And it's just an economics situation. Of course, if you've got a situation where on the one hand, you've got no stability, no benefits in terms of pension or year-round health insurance, a low percentage of promotional revenue going back to fighters in large part because they don't have associations or unions like other major sports often do, at helping them negotiate things like pensions, benefits, and royalty stuff. You look at the fact that these fighters are supposed to get royalty checks based on licensing of their name, which they sign over in perpetuity for things like video games, action figures, and stuff like that. Yet there's no actual auditing mechanism for them to look into their sales and see why have I not gotten a check. And Iaquinta and many others I've spoken with have said, I've never received a royalty check. So, maybe he's never sold anything, I guess, right? No one's ever played with him in a UFC game, or I don't know how they calibrate that. If you look at that on the one side, and you look at the fact that a guy like him, who's been in the top 10 for a good bit of time, is guaranteed only $26,000 to co-main event a nationally televised, at the very least, and in reality an internationally televised fight. Well, then the fact that fighters are so dependent on bonuses is obvious, and the UFC was public in saying Iaquinta won't be eligible for bonus for X period of time. This was included in that time. It's been 2 years, but it was a period of fights that they had decreed unilaterally without any type of disciplinary process, which people who are represented by unions or associations would be able to take part in, to appeal things, there's just no clarity in that process. So it's just a literal observation that he's making, and fans would be wise to listen up to him. Listen, he's not a guy that's waiting for people to give things to him. He from my understanding, and I spoke with his teammate who was there in Nashville as well, Aljamain Sterling. I spoke with him at the event after talking to Iaquinta in the media scrum, and then earlier this week, following up once he got back to New York, I spoke with Aljamain at length into the story that is up at FloCombat.com, and he spoke a lot about these issues. He said, hey, we started doing real estate this past August. These guys they have initiative. They're not just complaining. They're going out there and they're finding other ways to make money. But they're just telling us about that. At the same time, they're trying to explain things. So, every point. I didn't listen to his interview yet on MMA Hour. I'm sure it was phenomenal. But I listened to him in person in Nashville and spoke with some of his teammates and afterwards. And everything he's saying is just is just plain. The fact that he's irate about it, then maybe we could see beyond it. But the fact that he is saying he's never received a royalty check is astounding, because I remember when things like the action figure deal came out years ago, stuff that, for example, a lot of fighters at AKA were actually punished or released initially because they had the smart sense to say, hey, wait a minute, I'm a little wary of signing on to a deal that gives away my name and likeness forever. When deals have been in place for years and fighters are saying I've never received a royalty check, that's a real big problem, even if we just ignore the fact that a guy like Iaquinta is making $26,000 guaranteed only to fight in a company that is at an all-time high in popularity, an all-time high in terms of money being invested into it from all sorts of major international brands. It's a bit absurd, especially when he's as highly ranked as he is, or as he should be. So he makes very, very good points. He's just speaking matter fact when you look behind the volume, and he has very good reason to be upset. I'm so happy to see guys speak openly about the economics of this, and because I think we're getting a situation is, ironically, this is reminding me of 10, 12, 13 years ago, where so many fighters had to keep second jobs in order to pursue their dreams. And the idea was like, man, if this sport ever takes off, if the UFC ever takes off and gets big money invested, let's say from something like a WME IMG or from Harley Davidson or for any number of these, or Reebok or something like that, man, or if we ever get on cable television or network television, man, that'd be amazing. Finally, it would pay off. Well, now we look 12, 13 years later, all that money is involved in the sport. It is mainstream in so many ways, except for that they don't have representation or through unions and associations, so they don't get a seat at the table negotiating benefits and royalties and things of that nature. And fighters are still having to get second and third jobs in order to make ends meet. It's a bit crazy, because I think what we're going to do, we've been talking a lot in the MMA sphere about the UFC in this contraction phase after this new ownership took on so much debt. They've been closing down offices, and they've been letting go top 5, top 10 fighters go in recent years, unsigned, unrenewed. We're talking about fighters a lot of times going to Bellator for money. But what I think is equally as noticeable and much more of an issue is we're looking at a situation where top 10, top 5 UFC fighters may have to leave the sport of mixed martial arts because they don't really think it's actually worth it economically anymore. Not for the time they put in, not for the money they make. And that's insane to think about, all the money that's in the UFC now for these fighters to still be in the same position effectively that they were so many years ago before there was all this money in. So the idea is this. The fighters always thought, in fact, they used to be specifically told, hey guys, I know we don't pay you that much, but you can leverage this exposure we're giving you because we worked hard to get back on cable, back on pay-per-view. You can get sponsors and offset it. Now they can't do that effectively because there's no branding allowed on their persons or their coaches' persons during fight weeks, other than Reebok, which they get money for that, which they didn't have a seat at the table of negotiating, how much they would get for that. It's insane, because they were always thinking at the end of the rainbow, once the sport blew up, they would get a piece of that action. They haven't gotten a piece of that action with all this money, all these billions of dollars in the UFC. The fighters are still left behind, and so it's sad. And I hope people listen to what you have to say. I hope people read the story. Aljamain Sterling has been he's just as kind of earnest and honest. And Aljamain talks about in the story, hey, I'm doing flipping houses. I'm trying to do this. Aljamain Sterling is also going to take the New York City Fire Department's test this September to look at a third career. Aljamain Sterling's a top 10 guy and has been for a couple of years. It's astounding. These guys aren't just complaining. They're doing their part. They're following their dreams and they're looking for other ways to make money. They're doing that. They're not asking for handouts. But it's still noticeable, and it really reminds me of the stuff I read about, like baseball players in the 60s or football players, American football players like in the 60s and 50s, where in the off season to be working at a department store or something like that to make ends meet. And we should be way past it with the amount of money that's in MMA.
I think it's ridiculous, and it's like a lot of people in the MMA media obviously are doing this part-time, and we sort of get used to it, but when you hear about the fighters in the sport that we actually cover and they're doing the same thing, I mean, it is not unreasonable to think that, we might be doing literally the exact same job that a fighter that we are covering is doing. It's a ridiculous thought. And you mentioned people listening to Iaquinta. I certainly hope they do, and I think Iaquinta, he's very real, he's very raw, he can be very emotional. He's not maybe the most eloquent when it comes to expressing himself, and I think sometimes people dismiss him because of that. But he has a lot of valid points. I mean, I think that he blasted the UFC over not getting the win bonus. For the record, I don't actually have an issue with who got the UFC bonuses. I think Mike Perry deserved it. It was a great knockout. Artem and Cub, what can you say about that fight? It was a fun fight. So I think they deserved it. And Brandon Moreno, I mean, he was the first ever to stop Dustin Ortiz, and he choked him out. I have no issues with who got the bonuses. I'm not saying that Iaquinta was robbed, but really, like you mentioned, Elias, the bigger issue is that the fighter pay is so low. that these bonuses, they make or break the fighters, and it shouldn't be that way. I think, Ryan Bader spoke to us about it recently, and he's spoken about it a lot in general, about how, now that he's got certain money that's guaranteed in Bellator, he feels like he can be freer to fight the way he wants to and put on more of a performance. And even when we had him on a few times ago, Bader was talking about how he's got a side business with, I think, Nootropics, and he's saying, well, that's what you got to do. You got to have a side gig. You got to take care of yourself. TJ Dillashaw saying the same thing. A lot of these guys saying the same thing, and it's just ridiculous to think that they're in such a huge sport, and their attitude is, well, you got to do it. You got to take care of yourself. When really their main priority should be focusing on fighting, and that should be what's taking care of them. The way that they are obviously putting asses in seats and getting their name on television. So, and really, like you mentioned, I think a lot of people looking at this, and Iaquinta as well, it's about UFC bonuses. It really isn't. The frustration that he had a few months ago, it clearly never went anywhere. Nothing was solved, because he's still talking about collective bargaining, the UFC not paying for his surgery, the low pay, and the lack of respect from, Dana White, and the way he shows respect to fighters. This isn't about win bonus. I think Iaquinta would be very dumb, and I don't think he is, to go into this saying, look, I'm going to fight, and if I get the win bonus, that everything is great, and if I don't, then I hate the company. Obviously, none of these things were solved. He went in, he had a fight, didn't get the win bonus, got frustrated, and he's saying that he got fighting out of his system now, and more power to him. Now he doesn't feel that need that a lot of fighters do. He's taken care of himself outside the octagon, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. It's just unfortunate the way it's come, that, it's come to that we're saying more power to him, and yet he's essentially giving up his dream, which is what he's always wanted to do. And it's a shame, because he's a lightweight who I think in some ways was almost ahead of his time. You hear about some of the things and training methods that he had, and it sounded like he was pioneering things, and now we may never see him fight again.
And I mean, I want to sort of speak about this whole Cris Cyborg situation with the UFC in a second, but quickly, while we're still on UFC Nashville, Casper, your thoughts on the main event between Cub Swanson and Artem Lobov, and if you have any thoughts on sort of who should be next for the man, if anyone stands out for you, do you think Cub should be the next guy to get a title shot?
Yeah, look, just quickly, I don't think there were too many surprises here. I think most people expected Cub to go in there, beat Artem. I think most people thought he was going to do it quickly, maybe within the first couple of rounds. Massive respect to Artem for sticking in there. I think that was the biggest surprise of the fight, that, he hung in there with a top 4, top 5 guy. Essentially, though, It kind of speaks to how low the standards were set for Artem, that a lot of people thought that, he did an amazing job, a phenomenal job, just because he hung in there. Not to sound disparaging or disrespectful to Artem, but he's still clearly not at that level where, he was talking about facing Jose Aldo and winning a title. He's definitely not at that level in his career. And Cub Swanson, you can't really draw too much from this fight. He basically looked like he was having a sparring session. He looked like he was having a lot of fun, just practicing a bunch of fun techniques. He hit Artem with the Russian hammer, the same sort of overhand, hammer strike that Artem hit on Ishihara. He was just having a lot of fun in there, and you can't really say much about his chances against, say, Aldo or Holloway or any of those top guys by beating an unranked guy like Artem. So I think what's best for Cub is probably a good fight with Korean Zombie. We don't really know where Korean Zombie stands at the moment. He had that massive layoff, he came back, he looked great against Dennis Bermudez, and like Cub, he's lost to some of the top guys in the division as well. So maybe put them together, have a fun fight, and whoever wins, maybe they'll be a step closer to title contention.
Yeah, it was a great fight, and yeah, I think people really sort of enjoyed that one. I know you probably did. Elias cage side there, Cub Swanson. I mean, a guy that's been in the game for a really long time. So happy to see him do well. Let's quickly jump to Cris Cyborg though, because apart from Iaquinta, there's other people having issues with the UFC. Cris Cyborg has been having issues with the UFC for quite some time. We saw a tweet out on her Twitter, starting my Monday training with a smile, and it had a picture of her versus Jermaine Durandami, hashtag UFC 214, hashtag UFC Anaheim, hashtag Let's Go Champ. She tagged Sean Shelby, the Iron Lady, and the UFC in it, and read it's time. And then we saw a response from the UFC Espanol Twitter page that basically got translated to, "This event is not scheduled yet. By the way, Cyborg is offered before 2 fights of championship in 145 and 1 in 135 and rejected all." Elias, you have a person here like Cyborg who draws in ratings, who is, a lot of people would consider a big star in the game. What are your thoughts on the way this was handled, and just in general, this relationship that she's had with the UFC, which doesn't seem to be getting any better?
Yeah, it's idiotic. I mean, fighters say things all the time. I'm getting ready for a fight. and UFC Twitter handles don't go out of their way to correct them all the time. And they have it out for Cris Cyborg, which is interesting because the UFC had been paying her for long before she fought for them. She's making good money for them by drawing huge numbers in Brazil, huge numbers here in America. It's a very strange thing, but it's also not surprising, right? Like, this level of disrespect, that is what it is. Just unbelievable disrespect. Pales in comparison what the UFC's own president has done for years and years, calling her a man, effectively, by saying she's looked like Wanderlei Silva in a skirt, I believe, just railing at her insult after insult. Not to mention the fact that they've just arbitrarily for years said, we're not going to do a 145 class, so you have to go to 140 for no reason. And also the fact that they've thrown her under the bus many times before by saying, we've offered her fights and she rejected it. Yeah, you could offer a world champion a fight on relatively short notice, and treat them like they're not the world champion, which she is at 145, and then act as if she's some type of coward. But that's a strange thing. But it's a strange thing that the UFC does all the time. The last time Tyron Woodley, welterweight champion, was fighting, the biggest news and the biggest headlines around him were how Dana White was insulting him for his last performance at UFC 205, which was, I believe in Manhattan in Madison Square Garden, which was a spectacular, historic, instant classic with Stephen Thompson that was so evenly fought that it was scored a draw. Dana White was insulting his champion for doing that. Dana White told him literally to shut up and fight, and said it in other ways as well. Just, this is what Dana White does. He constantly insults his own fighters. The UFC always buries people when they have any type of tension with them, and it's not to me a real big coincidence that it often comes down to fighters like Cyborg who are open and speaking out and criticizing the UFC or saying she could stand on her own at the UFC, or Tyron Woodley, who talks about structural racism in society and within the sport of MMA, and they don't want to talk about that. I mean, it's not surprising, unfortunately, that the UFC social team would handle it so poorly because they're just taking after the lead of their president, who just constantly disparages fans, media members, and fighters themselves. Very much in the model. I don't say this lightly. I think it's a very interesting parallel, very much like his friend Donald Trump, or President of the United States here. I mean, it's a constant pattern of trying to intimidate media members, trying to berate fans, the constituents, if you will, which Dana White often does on Twitter, insulting fans and media members, even with doing things with misogynistic insults, with homophobic slurs, and he does it to his own fighters as well. So it's crazy. I think it happens a lot. Some of the people in the UFC, they try to be like mini Dana Whites because they think that's cool, and I think it kind of be attributed to that. But I think it's a very bizarre situation that sadly is actually kind of should have been expected, I guess, at this point.
Mm-hmm. And my thing is, all right, you can say something on one of the UFC Twitters, but you can, possibly just say, hey, this fight has not been confirmed. Something like that. And then just leave the other stuff off it and keep it classy. I just feel like you have a star like Cris Cyborg, and sometimes they use this stuff like, putting stuff out in the media, and that kind of works sometimes with some fighters. Some of those fighters like sort of challenge to fight, and then they sort of go alongside it. But then other times you get other fighters who are genuinely sort of hurt by this, and it just kind of makes them not want to fight at all and not want to be in the UFC at all. And I just don't understand when you have a big star like a Cris Cyborg and you can see the ratings, it's already there, it's on paper, you know what you can do with them. Why not go about it a different way? Why not sort of approach it from a more respectful way? And I mean, Cris is from Brazil, and respect's a huge deal there. It's a different sort of culture, and maybe what might work for some of the, more westernized fighters that don't take it as personally, may not work for her. But I just think that, just in general, there should be a lot more respect for fighters in general that are on the UFC roster. So I just don't understand, especially it was just weird how that was the account that did it. I know that they sort of did it in Espanol and they wanted to put it out there, but I don't know. It just seems you've got all these accounts. The whole thing, it just seems really, really silly and stupid to me, and almost might make Cris feel a little bit, not worthless, but a little bit disappointed even more in her relationship with the UFC, rather than try and fix it and get to a point where you can actually come to a point where you can actually figure out what's going on, especially as I know she's going through a lot of tough personal times at the moment as well in Brazil. So it's a little bit disappointing. But Elias, let's jump over to you because you, my friend, are someone that's got a lot happening. Now, for those who haven't read your FloCombat article, and this was an excellent one, towards failure why FloCombat writer needs to fight again. Fantastic article sort of detailing your process and thoughts into going back into competition and more specifically into grappling competition. You have one coming up called A Fight to Win 33, which can actually be watched on Flow Grappling, and that's coming up this weekend on the 29th of April in the States and the 30th here in Australia. Talk to us a little bit about some of the stuff that's been going on with you and some of the stuff the fans can look forward to seeing you compete in.
Well, first of all, thanks for reading the piece, man. I appreciate it. It's I haven't fought. I've fought as an amateur. And it's fun. It's training jiu-jitsu and MMA is something I gotten a chance to do going back to when I was in high school. My dad signed me up, and so I like to do it. But I haven't done it. I haven't fought MMA for about 4 years now. I had some back and neck disc injuries, and I accepted fights and had to pull out because of them. But I've been healthy. I've been sparring again, and it's been nice. And some opportunities came up to jump into some real deep waters on the grappling side, submission grappling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu side, which is not something that I've done since before I started fighting. And I was never like a high-level grappler either. And, I'm not a high-level MMA fighter now. But some opportunities came up and in really interesting situations as opposed to like the usual tournament format that, jiu-jitsu players might be familiar with, where you try to win a whole big tournament and go through multiple opponents in a competition that takes away the strikes and stuff, and it's just the takedowns and the submissions and things like that. This show, they're coming up, the Fight to Win show, and then an XFO submission grappling show May 13th. They're single matches, so you're gonna go there. You're cutting weight. You're doing the medicals. You show up. You warm up. You do the walk. They announce your name. Very similar, I am imagining, to what it feels like when the day of a fight, when you got to go out there and you make a single walk down. There's not a whole bunch of mats and matches that people are watching all at once like a tournament. It's one mat at a time and one ring that the people are looking at. And I'm just basically doing it to kind of go through the emotional roller coaster that you go through on fight night, where you, at least I'll just speak for myself. Every single time I've had a fight within like a 2-hour period of waiting, and waiting is by far the worst part. I've felt like Godzilla, and then I've also felt like a total fraud, and I'm the worst competitor in the world ever. Like, you just go through these ups and downs, and it's a crazy thing, and it's a hard thing to go through, and I haven't gone through it in a while. So the hope is to fight MMA again before the year is out, and I'm thinking these submission wrestling matches will be good to get me in a position to ride out those nerves again. I'm going against some really good guys. I looked them up. They're definitely better than me, so I think it'll be fun to try to beat them, and it'll be fun to try to, not get crippled. So I'm excited about it. It should be a good time.
Yeah, I think that's really I think it's really inspirational and something that a lot of people could probably learn from. And I was reading that article thinking that your theory makes a lot of sense. And if it wasn't for obviously the risk of injuries, it'd be a great thing for UFC or other MMA fighters to do, maybe before they come back from a layoff. But of course, there are other injuries that would stop them from doing that. As far as your fight, like you mentioned, May 13th, XFO Pro 3, that's when you're going to have your second grappling comp. And then as far as the fight, when are you sort of targeting that?
Well, I hate to have the hubris, and there's a bit of hubris in scheduling 2 separate matches back to back, and then assuming that I'll be healthy after one, and then assuming I'll be healthy after 2 of them. So that may not happen. But if I do both of these and I'm healthy enough to continue on with the training and don't have any interruptions, I think that puts me on pace for like a fall, this coming fall here in the States, an October, November. Thing, certainly before the end of the year. If everything goes well and I'm able to continue to ramp up my training and do more and more sparring around. So that's my general thing. Someone like me in my position, that's as specific as I can kind of get. It's not like I have, people knocking down my door to give me some date like I'm a pro fighter and put me on a card. There's a ton of regional fights any given place. You could always get on a card if you want to fight bad enough. So my general thinking is that if everything goes well, at least health-wise, at these 2, and I can continue hard training this summer, that I might be ready for something in the fall. And, that could be anywhere against anyone, I guess.
And with that original CM Punk fight not happening in the UFC, I almost feel like this could be a lead up to a second one if he ever decides to fight again. And according to his girlfriend in a recent interview, it seems like he's considering it. So, guys, make sure to follow Elias on Twitter at Elias Cepeda. Also, check out his great work on FloCombat. He's recently joined up with them. So that's like an Avengers or Justice League of great writers and people over there, and also his work on mixedmartialarts.com, and also the Extra Rounds podcast with our ginger friend Mike Dice. So make sure to check that out. And while we're wrapping things up, we just want to quickly thank Ryan Bader, Jorge Masvidal, Johny Hendricks, Justin Flores, of course, Elias Cepeda, and Tommy Toehold for being on this program. Cass, a fun episode of Submission Radio. So much fun chatting to all the great guests this week.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of fun times. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Definitely give us your feedback in the YouTube comments below, or hit us up on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, or on Facebook. We are always open to messages, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. And that is a wrap. We'll have a nice, sexy, spicy episode next week. In the meantime, stay safe. I'll see you next week.